Hello and welcome to Maximal Fire. I'm Alex.
And I'm Johnny.
And on today's episode, we're doing the Legions Imperialis Traitor Legions tier list. Hello, Johnny. It is that time again. It is podcast recording day.
Oh, yes. Couldn't come sooner.
You're looking very summery. Are you trying to bring in the British weather or something?
I'm manifesting it.
It's like almost like a muted Hawaiian shirt thing you've got going on there.
Yeah, you know what you wear what you want to see in the world, which is considerably better weather.
That sunshine. Yeah, no, we've had our summer now. Did you must have missed it. It was only 3 days long.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been pretty crap since.
Yeah, certainly has.
Yeah, it's a UK thing.
Very much a UK thing. Yeah, it's we have our 3 days of summer, and then that's it. We're into autumn and then winter for the next 6 months or so. But yeah, you might have noticed slightly different looking intro to today's episodes. Maximal Fire has undergone a big rebrand thing. I'm very sad to see our Reaver go, but obviously we don't own the rights to the Reaver silhouette. So we have now a logo which is all ours, and we can do with kind of as we please. And I must admit, I'm very happy with the rebrand. I really like the change. So it may look and feel
the original vibe, but
yeah, we've managed to pull in elements from the old one still, so it should hopefully still feel quite Maximal Fiery. Let us know what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? There's no going back now, unfortunately. So if you hate it,
we've paid the money. That's it, guys.
So yeah, on today's episode, we're going to do, it's almost like a celebration episode, isn't it? Because I think the last episode, which we released about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we announced that we were on our way to 2,000 subscribers. And in the time that's passed, we've hit that. We've actually blown through that. We've now surpassed that by nearly 150 subscribers. So we are very happy, and we thought, let's do a special episode. So we thought we'd bring to you today, we'll roll out the old tier list episode, which, love it or hate it, it usually makes for good content.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People love their tier lists on YouTube. It's going to be a fun one to do as well. I feel like it'll get moderately lukewarm. We're going to get a lot of hate comments. I feel like people feel very strongly about their legions, and I think we don't really have any that we hold too close to heart. So I feel like it could get a bit, we could be a bit loose with our tongue.
Yeah, and
especially on the lore bit.
Yeah, we are, and that sort of rolls on to the other point. We are approaching this from two different stances. We are approaching it from a rules in Legions Imperialis perspective, and we're also casting our opinion as well on the lore which surrounds that particular legion. So that, I think, is going to get spicy. Hopefully there won't be too many shades of grey on the rules section of it. But like you say, everyone's got their own favourite legios. I'm sure that many people have very, very vastly different opinions. If you want to have a go at doing this yourself, I've created a public tier list in TierMaker online. So if you go to tiermaker.com, search for, I think I called it like Traitor Space Marine Legions Ranked. You can follow along and do the exact same exercise that we have and put them kind of as and where you would want them to be. But before that, I just want to give a quick shout out to our new patrons who've joined us since last time. I want to say thank you to Michael Farrell, Dan, Robert Wotherspoon, Adam Cox, and Mikola Lenchuk. So thank you very much, guys, for continuing to support the channel. There's been a few changes to our Patreon in the last few weeks as part of the rebrand. We've opened up some additional sponsorship slots, which we're now doing through Patreon as a Patreon tier. So if you are interested in becoming a patron, a sponsor of Maximal Fire, please get in touch with us, and we'll point you in the direction of what you need to do to officially sponsor us. So obviously we've got the guys at Battlebling, Troublemaker Games, Grimdark Terrain, and Entoyment still on the books, which is great, but there is space for potentially 2 more sponsors as well. So thank you very much, guys, for continuing to support the show. Just a reminder that if you are a patron, you get an extended version of this podcast. There's a whole section, which is kind of like an after show section called the New Sphere. We take patrons' questions, and generally it's like to say it's relaxed is kind of a bit of an understatement. We're basically horizontal through most of that section.
We need to get a fireplace.
And some smoking jackets and some cigars.
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe. Some cigars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always...
I'm looking forward to the questions today as well. They look pretty good.
Yeah. And, the patrons, they submit the questions, and we try our best to answer them without offending too many people. But, it's never foolproof. But we got a meaty topic today in the form of the Traitor Legions ranked. If we do hit 2,500 subscribers in the not too distant future, we will come back again and we will do the loyalist equivalent of this. So if you haven't already, please give us a like, give us a subscribe, and then when we hit that 2,500 number, we'll drop that. Well, maybe not exactly at the same time. We won't drop it immediately, but we will. That will be the next podcast that we record as soon as we hit those numbers. So I think we just need to dive straight into this. I think we're gonna start with the lore section. I've got my nice screen share up here in front of us.
There we go. Look at that.
Me and Johnny haven't discussed any of this. And although I think Johnny's going to probably take most of the lead on the lore section, I'm going to talk mostly on the rules. I'm sure that we're going to have opinions of other people's opinions. So let's see how closely you and I align, and try and hope that there's no arguing or friction, shall we?
Here's hoping, eh?
Here's hoping. So, first one, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this in order, in Legion number. So, starting at the first in the list, the Third Legion themselves. I see what you did there. Yeah. We're doing 50% of the Dark Angels in this episode.
Subscriber count just goes down by like 10 as like all the Dark Angels fans in the chat just immediately abort.
we have so many Dark Angels. A lot of my friends have always been Dark Angels, and it's definitely one of those points where they now just kind of, it's a deep sigh, a rolling of the eyes, and a yes, heard that one a few times kind of thing.
I think it's more entertaining, their reactions, than us actually caring that much about the Legion either.
So,
anyway, sorry.
Third Legion, the Emperor's Children, Fulgrim's little boys.
Oh, yes. Emperor's Children, they are your rock stars narratively. They are, I guess people know them quite well from their 40k equivalent, which is, the Noise Marine with the guitar.
The iconic model from the late 80s, which they re-released a few years ago.
Leopard print, bright colours. This Legions, wow, in Titanicus brain already. This Legions, I guess, fall to heresy is a tragic one. Them and their Primarch, Fulgrim, are obsessed with perfection, which makes them formidable opponents, but is also their biggest flaw. With perfection comes their hubris, and that's how you end up potentially getting what are we doing for spoilers here, Alex? How in depth do we want to go? Because I feel like if you haven't read the 12-year-old book now,
I mean, on the I think we should probably say that this will be a spoiler heavy episode. Yeah. So
spoiler warning.
I think that it's probably fair game to say, same as our Discord rules, right? 6 months after the publication. So I think maybe let's try and avoid ending the death part 3.
Oh yeah, we're not going to go that deep.
but I think the other ones are probably fair game. But these
Yeah,
guys are kind of like the epitome of that old adage, aren't they? That pride comes before a fall.
before a fall, exactly. And yeah, it ends up with Fulgrim getting corrupted by a Slaneshi possessed weapon, and essentially beheading his brother and becoming fully possessed by a demon. So it's a very, very cool story. These guys are, they can be. It's not necessarily always like a downside either. There are quite a few notable loyalist Emperor's children. So you've got like Soltarvitz, who is one of the main protagonists at the beginning of the kind of Horus Heresy collection. And he kind of embodies what's good about them. He would take it in quite a measured level in some respects. So, but yeah, Legion are awesome. They have some very, very sick models in Forge World, including the Demon Primarch version of Fulgrim, which is a beast of a model. And one day I'll tackle that monster.
There were so many conversions of that model, wasn't there, before they finally unveiled him? It very much lent itself to Converter's kind of paradise. But that
That's
model
the thing
still
as well,
scares me a little bit, I think, from the amount of pointy resiny bits that there are on there. But as far as sculpting, it is possibly perfect. Rightly so for Fulgrim, pretty close to perfection.
Damn right. The Horus Heresy design team as a whole are just pretty much always very good. And there are a few exceptions, poor Rolderon. But yeah, they've got some of the coolest models. I love the Cacophony, which are the Horus Heresy equivalent, the ancestors to Noise Marines. So they've got their big sonic weapons, and although they aren't quite like playing guitars or anything, they do look like instruments. There's a lot of like curved like designs and detailing on them that kind of gives the idea of a saxophone. But yeah,
is that not where they kind of stemmed from? Like, I'm trying to recall. It's been so long since I read the first 3 books, but they kind of have that like orgy of noise and
so they
excess,
have the
don't they? And I'm sure the Cacophony, or there's some kind of link in there.
They have. Okay, this is where my like absolute nerd's going to come out here. So there's Julius Caesaron. I'm probably butchered his name now after saying that. Who was like the original Noise Marine, and they were creating the Bekwakinski was creating a grand play out of some like old texts, and just basically they're like on the way to becoming possessed by Slanesh anyway. Like everyone was kind of like worshipping them indirectly on the flagship, and they basically create this like grand orchestra, which is a kind of a summoning ritual for demonettes, for lesser demons of Slanesh. And the first Noise Marines actually used their sonic weapons, and they were meant to kind of be like almost like playing, but obviously the excesses turned up so much that they just like end up killing most of the people in the room, and then the demonettes just start slaughtering. So they are they are the legion of orgies and excess and just weird stuff, dude. But they're awesome, and the models are cool, and their lore is very cool.
These are your heresy boys, aren't they? You love meddling at the 28mm range with the Emperor's Children. I've seen some of your stuff, in particular the Noise Marines. Is it safe to say they're one of your sort of favoured Marine?
I would say so, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, they're in the top 3 for sure. I think they're awesome, and I've always really liked. And they have like a Lord Commander Eidolon, and he's an arsehole throughout the entire like Horus Heresy novels when he's around. Everyone fucking hates him, including Fulgrim, but he's good and a sassy bitch, and I love him. I think he's such a cool character because he's like such a good bad guy. like you love to hate him. It's like that character in Harry Potter, that professor that wears like pink and shit, and like you hate her
That's
throughout the movie, but it's like such a good fit. Like everyone like unites in hating this like one character, and it just shows like how good the character. Dolores Umbridge, yeah,
is
so
Eidolon. Okay.
That's my entire summary of the Emperor's Children lore. Is Dolores Umbridge is Eidolon.
Is this a theme we need to carry on through the rest of this tier? You know, which Harry Potter character is the first captain?
No more Harry Potter characters.
Particular legion. Oh Jesus Christ!
We've put off already, haven't we?
I want to see some photoshops of Lord Commander Umbridge.
Damn.
Okay, before we stick a tier list on the lore for these guys, I'm going to throw in like I think my job today is going to be to stir the pot a little bit when it comes to this stuff and poke some bears. But do you not feel that when it comes to like lore with the Emperor's Children, there's two halves. The first half of the series, in fact, I don't even know if I would go the first half of the series. I would say within the first 3 books, the Emperor's Children are really deep. They are they have some sort of excellent sort of set pieces. They have some really interesting 3-dimensional lore, and they kind of by the end of it become almost like quite 2-dimensional antagonists.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think I didn't fully kind of do the proper lore discussion on them.
We have to say
it's actually
we aren't covering all of the lore, right, all the way up to like 40k. So there may be people screaming about what happens in the 40k era. We're talking heresy era. We're talking
heresy era
up to the battle of the Siege of Terror. So just to caveat that as well. But certainly in the books, it felt like when you kind of got to books like which was the White Scar book towards the end when they're trying to get home. It's not. Is that Brotherhood of the Storm or Scars or
something like that?
I can't remember. I think Scars. I can't remember. One of the later books, when they're trying to get away from everybody who's kind of holding them out at the edge of the galaxy. Eidolon's character just feels just like it's just a guy sort of chasing him with a stick.
Trick again.
Yeah. And I feel like for me the most interesting characters of the Emperor's Children was the interplay between Saul Tarvitz and Lucius. And we are really talking the early books here as well, but that when that kind of juxtaposition sort of went away inevitably, like it lost a little bit of what kind of really made it. They didn't quite get that with the Sons of Horus as an example, and we'll come to them later on, because you still had those kind of people who were very much pulled in conflicting directions. Even like Abaddon, right, didn't necessarily agree with everything, but I feel like the Emperor's Children sort of just went evil, and then that was it. They were evil from there on in.
Absolutely. And I think that you really kind of nailed it there. So, this is a legion that at its, before the heresy books even began, they were reduced to but a single marine due to like a devastating defect with their gene seed. They had to spend a lot of the time with the Sons of Horus because they just didn't have enough strength to actually go on their own crusade. So they have very like deep, rich and interesting lore, and definitely through the kind of the beginning of the heresy novels, and like you said, with the interplay between Lucius and Saul Tarvitz, where Lucius, someone that is so damn prideful and like almost a lesser Eidolon in terms of how much of an asshole he is, still sticks with Saul Tarvitz through this kind of like this pseudo brotherhood, really right up until the end.
I'm trying to
So
remember what happened. Did he get sent down to Istvan with Saul, and then he
yeah,
turned? That was
yeah, he was sent down to Istvan, and he was pissed because it was like his affiliation with Soul basically sent him down there, and the dude like fights for a good while. I can't remember the name of the tank commander or commander even, but this like like very highly revered Emperor's Children commander is like leading the assault against them on the heretic side. And Lucius is just like, you and me, bitch, let's go, and fucking wrecks him. Um, like just like 1v1ing the leader of the attacking host, grabs his bloody helmet, and then is like, oh, okay, I'll be your, because he knows that he's not going to live, right? Like, even without knowing about the virus bombs, it was a matter of days. So he goes, hey, I'll let you into the surprisingly well fortified position that the loyalists had set up. And so, yeah, it's kind of, and then from that point, it kind of goes into like quite fittingly, I guess, a downward spiral of kind of depravity and excess. And I think to the later kind of parts of the series, they very much are just the one trick pony of just being just dickheads the entire time and ruining the traitors' plans always because they're just goofing around doing their own thing.
yeah. It becomes a liability as much as an
They
asset.
well, they completely were. They're one of the bigger reasons why the Siege of Terror wasn't over as quickly, because they fucked off into the human populated areas completely away from the main battle and just started like torturing and slaughtering civilians because it was fun, because it was like they don't need to fight in the war to be able to inflict their god's will on people. So you know a group of them kind of have a duke with Rogel Dawn, but it feels like it's probably one of the very few semi-impactful moments in the in those books. So yeah, they kind of teeter off towards the end, which is really sad, because they could have really been a very good kind of focused narratively like the narrative focusing on that legion throughout the books would have been really, really nice as well, or at least having some more books about them would have been sick,
So all that
because
being
there is
said,
just so
then
much to
Johnny,
explore.
where are we coming down with regards to the tier list for Emperor's Children from a perspective of their lore?
So the lore score,
From your opinion, of course.
see, this is the issue, right? I love them anyway. I think
Ash.
if I'm being, yeah, no, if there was like an A B, it would be that. But if I'm being objective, I'm gonna say B. Sadly, that might get upgraded as we go down, because I think we both discussed that we don't actually have a plan of where we're going to put them. It's in the field in the moment. So later on, I might be like, you know what, bump them up a
We've planned
little.
this sort of stuff in the past, and with other tier lists that we've done, and it can become quite sort of
yeah,
wooden. So like we're just going to go with it, and if things get moved,
let's go for it.
because things need to get moved, they'll get moved.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can't argue with the beat for these guys. Like I say, I think they've got some really interesting moments, but I think ultimately their heresy era kind of fizzles out with a sad fart towards the end of it, and how they exit the Siege of Terror is quite disappointing. But certainly the early part of it, certainly the parts related to their relationship with the Iron Hands and with Ferrus Manus in the early books is so, and it's probably a testament to the writers more than anything, but it's just such they managed to cram in such a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I will
And
always
memorable
remember that
moments.
scene of the when Fulgrim is having that kind of final discussion with Ferrus, and the Terminators, the Phoenix Terminators, are waiting outside with the Iron Hands, like honor guard as well, and they just like fucking execute them in one, and like not even struck back at. I just thought it was just such a like a decisive scene in the books for the kind of the Emperor's Children's heading. So yeah, no, some very, very cool stuff. Read Fulgrim. It's not to everyone's taste, but It's good.
So shall we move on to their Legions Imperialis Legion rules?
Oh yes, the rules. That's your wheelhouse.
This is my win, and again, probably going to upset people. Now, it's a lot of this is objective as well. The way that I will tier these is I generally prefer things which are always useful over things which are situational. So I will say that now, so you can bear that in mind when I'm giving them their rankings later on. But the special rules for the Emperor's Children is exemplars of war. So once per battle, an army that includes at least one formation consisting entirely of Emperor's Children models, ignoring models with the allied contingent, may choose to win initiative instead of rolling. They must declare that they are doing this before rolling. If both players have this rule, the player who did not have the initiative last round chooses if they use the rule first, and if they do so, no other player can use it this round. If the army includes at least one allied contingent comprised entirely of Emperor's Children detachments, then once per battle, the controlling player may re-roll the dice roll for an initiative instead. They can only do this if at least one Emperor's Children detachment is on the battlefield or in reserve. If they've all been destroyed or left the battlefield due to other special rules, this rule has no effect. So what the Emperor's Children basically give you, their special rule is the Legions Imperialis version of Dominant Strategist from Adeptus Titanicus. It lets you win an initiative and choose to act first. When you would otherwise kind of be doing it off a dice roll, or at its reduced version when they're like an allied detachment with some Solar Auxilia, you get that re-roll. So it's a very good ability to have. I think being able to dictate, when you steal the initiative is very good. It is not as good in game terms as Dominant Strategist is for Adeptus Titanicus, because in Adeptus Titanicus you can choose which phase you act first. So you could act second in the movement phase and then go, right, well, now it's the combat phase, I'm actually going first, and you can sit back and I'm now going to shoot you before you shoot me. Whereas the initiative phase in this only happens once, right at the very beginning. So once per game ability, there is always that chance where you would never need it. I think that it is very good in terms of having it as a trick up your sleeve. And for this reasoning, I feel like you are losing out a little bit if you have an entire Emperor's Children force. Other than the fact it'll look awesome and it'll look great. It falls into the category for me of one of those legions which you get the most out of it by having it as one formation in your force. And I think we've seen this happen a couple of times. Like even on the White Dwarf Battle Report, they had I think it was only one or maybe two formations of Emperor's Children, but it wasn't the only set of Legion rules that they took. So it's a useful ability to have. It's not something which you can't really build a force around it. You don't get any bonuses to any of your units or anything. It's a nice up the sleeve thing to have. So I think for that reason, I think that I'm going to also put their rules in B for now. They're certainly not an S grade rule for me. There's not enough there, I think, to make it a take. I'm almost kind of thinking, is it B or is it C? But
yeah, I might be more team C, to be honest, because the thing, the comparison between that and Dominant Strategist is that it's a great warlord trait. That's a real good warlord trait. It's not completely broken, but it's it is almost an auto include. Whereas like an entire Legion rule, it's nothing actually directly affecting your forces. So
I have just thought about where I'm going to put the other ones though. And I wonder if we do need some more nuance. I will put that. I think I will capitulate and put that in C, as per your suggestion. That may go up.
We can change it. Yeah,
may go up depending on how I feel about the rest of them. So that's Emperor's Children. Next up,
Mm.
the Fourth Legion, the Iron Warriors. Like these
Oh
guys, I
yes.
never really kind of liked the Iron Warriors in the past, but like the more I go through the Heresy, and especially when I read the 40k novel, is it Storm of
Oh,
Iron?
all right. Okay. Yeah,
I
I've not
think
read
it
that one.
is,
Yeah.
which is when you were introduced to. Oh my gosh, it's so many years ago since I read it. What is his name? There's a character in it, which turns up in the Ultramarines series of books as well by Graham McNeil.
Okay. Yeah.
Honsu. Honsu. It really kind of turned my head to them, and I started getting a little bit more interested. And these guys, for me, I think are contenders for my second Legion in
Mm.
Legions Imperialis, and I'd also be tempted to use them in if we ever picked up some Horus Heresy,
Oh,
just
please
because.
pick up some Horus Heresy.
I know, I'm sorry, I let
Please,
you down on
bro.
that one.
Come on. You
Um,
dropped the ball on that one.
yeah, but why don't you take us through with
Yeah.
the Iron Warriors?
So, Primarch
Perty.
wow, I got Perty Perturabo. There we go. Um, these guys are your grumpy um, engineers slash besiegers, siege makers. Also, um, fortifiers as well. Although they're like most hated brothers, the Imperial Fists get that kind of accolade, whereas they get the we break walls. Even though Perturabo, the petulant man-child that he is, um, uh, yeah, just can definitely make very good fortifications. It's kind of Dawn's thing still, and he can't deal with that. Um, I do feel a little bit sorry for them. They are that like so, or they feel like they are so underappreciated. Um, they're just like any kind of tiny IT department in a big company, right? Like people just do not appreciate the magic that they do because they're just constantly kind of they're just doing their job and they're doing it well. They're not making a song and dance about it. They're not prideful or very very like happy to accept accolades like like the Sons of Horus are or Emperor's Children, etc. They just shut up and they get their job done through gritted determination. But they like put that on themselves and their own like rigid culture. So they're like constantly complaining, but they're constantly complaining about stuff that they absolutely could just resolve and fix, right? Um,
They do get used quite a lot for the dirty work though by Horus.
they do.
Horus doesn't
I mean,
tolerate kind of the any kind of back talking by Perturabo, and although
so
he says he's his closest brother, like towards
yeah,
the end, because he can rely on Perturabo, or
mm,
at least he feels he can rely on him. Like he used the Iron Warriors,
oh yeah,
throughout, even pre-heresy. Like they were used, and their blood was basically spent as a currency to win wars and bring worlds to compliance.
I think pre-heresy, I don't think it was as bad, and I think they kind of they just kind of bitched and moaned about it. Like, sure, they were being thrown in the arse end, but that's what they were good at, right? Like, it should be it should be an honor that they're put in like these shit tier situations.
Only you can
Um,
break it.
only you can bring down your mighty hammer. Um, yeah, but just they do get shafted by Horus. But then also Perturabo just decides that they fuck off, and you kind of wonder like what were you expecting to happen? Basically, Perturabo isn't happy with the fact that he's very much like this is a Marine versus Marine war. Like everyone stay the fuck out of it. Oh, but I'll use human soldiers. Um, and then he doesn't like the whole like the demonic influence, which is giving the traitors a huge edge in the war, and one of the reasons why they've managed to kind of do so well. Um, and so even
Do you
though
think?
knowing that
Do you not think
Horus
that?
is
Do you not think that stems from an element of resentment, though? Because like he was never really chosen by any of the Chaos Gods, and certainly through a lot of his lore, you see these instances where he's almost chasing that power because he gets put in his place, famously by Fulgrim in the Eye of Terror, which leads up to the devastation of Talon.
Yeah, very true. They're just so hard to feel sorry for, though. I will say, I still I think that I still think they're really fucking cool. I will probably say that about every single one of these legions because, like, objectively,
You can
they
tell
are
Johnny's
actually
getting passionate because the
all
F-bombs
very
are
cool.
dropping left, right,
well,
and centre. At the moment,
I love narrative, right? Like, a lot of the stuff we do is very game focused, and I love the game as well. But narrative is my jam. I play narratively. I don't, care too much about like optimal lists or anything like that. I just want it to narratively be cool. And so these guys are also like very cool. But my favorite kind of probably my favorite Horus Heresy book is Pharos. And yeah, good old brother Dantiok and Pow. I've forgotten the other guy's name. And it's about loyalist Iron Warriors not realizing about the heresy and them finding it out. And this is one I don't want to spoil too much because if you haven't read it, you should because it's amazing. The ending of that book, although it's not Iron Warriors related at all, is just like I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Like listening to it, I was like, "Holy shit, that's awesome!" But like throughout that book, it shows you like they're just like brutal, rigid determination, and their stoicism when the shit hits the fan, and the fan is their face every single time. So yeah, I don't know, they're cool, but
Dantiok,
kind of
though,
hard.
he's had so many he gets involved in a couple of really awesome set pieces. I mean, obviously the first time you see and hear about Dantiok, who is the loyalist Iron Warriors, is I forget the name of the bastion, but he's like one guy holding like a garrison fortress on a planet, and he effectively holds off an assault purely based on how it's all set up and stuff within the fortress, and like that's really cool. Like Pharos, his involvement in Pharos is a bit more lab geeky, but like you say, he still finds himself in the middle of a really interesting set piece. He's there's definitely there was definitely a little tear at the end of that book for me. Was Dantiok one of the ones which also went to Molech with Loken and those guys? The strike team that they were going to send in along with the Ultramarines librarian. What was his name?
Shit, yes.
Who gives him the Force Sword, which somehow works in his hands. I think he was one. I think he was one of the ones which was on that mission.
Is it Tiberius? No. God, he always talks about the name of that person's sword. I know. Throughout all the later books. And I can't. You'd be like, this person's sword I take in my hand. And it's like, yeah, you've said that like 5 times this sentence. Shit. Yeah, I know. Yeah. We'll get people in the comments being like, it was fucking that. Come on, dude.
The most frustrating episode ever. Like, why can't you remember all of these cast of thousands of
I was going to say
Space Marines?
I don't know whether you've seen the how to read the Horus Heresy flowchart on the internet.
I imagine it looks like that meme from Always Sunny with like tangents and stuff going off all over the place.
It is just, it's a mess. So bear with us if we're forgetting bits and bobs because all these names also kind of sound the same as well. But yeah, anyway, Iron Warriors. Rubio, that's it.
It's Rubio.
Tylos Rubio.
Rubio.
That's what I was getting the
so we get there in the end. It just takes us a while.
Rubio sword. Yeah.
I don't know what your excuse is. Like, I'm in my 40s now, so like it's Old man brain kicking in.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. I mean, I've got accelerated old man brain.
but the siege of Hera, the siege of Terra
Hera?
for the Iron Warriors is really like their kind of crowning glory. But I think though that is also the thing which sticks in his craw is it should be his crowning glory, and it isn't. And in the end, he like decides to quit the battlefield as well, and everybody slowly sort of goes off. And I do kind of feel a little bit sorry for Perturabo and how he is treated. But like you say, he is kind of often he manifests his own destiny to an extent there.
He has
and
a lot of power to change stuff.
Yeah, and he lets it becomes a pissing contest with Dawn, basically.
They're playing like 8D chess in the bloody Siege of Terror for like so many books in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. But like his Iron Circle as well, like one of the coolest units I think in the Heresy. I love the Iron Circle. And so yeah, where's anything more that you want to add on that before we stick another ranking against?
Yeah, I guess he's a paranoid. Perturabo is incredibly paranoid. So yeah, the Iron Circle replaced his Terminator Honor Guard, which made a very cool kind of like disgraced actual Terminator on a guard unit that are like, damn, we used to protect him, but now he doesn't even trust us, sort of thing. So yeah, hated by his Legion are grumpy. He's even grumpier. I think they're solid C contenders for lore. They just piss me off too much in those books to be likable, especially Perturabo. And like I said, they have absolute gems. But yeah, no, I'm gonna say C, and I know a lot of people are gonna be upset with me. And
I feel like we can't move on though before we've talked about the fact that Fulgrim tried to sacrifice him in a black hole, like as part of his like ascension.
Yeah,
you can understand why he would have trust issues, right? After I think one of his own brothers tried to sacrifice one of his allies.
The entire heresy is betrayal, right? Like, they've betrayed half their brothers already. What's to say that he's not another one on the list? Like, why isn't that just like a logical conclusion in this dude's head, who's meant to be this like master of tactics? Is like, oh yeah, Fulgrim's betrayed like half of the fucking loyalist Primarchs. Why would he have like any fucking faith that psycho would would like keep to his word at all? It's not like he didn't know him as a brother. You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I don't have much pity. In the C bin he goes.
I feel like you've been done a dirty with a C, but I'll accept it because there is better stuff out there. I'm interested to see where you land with some of the rest of it in the future.
This may change. I might be like, oh yeah, they're not as lame as this Legion.
Yeah, we'll get to the end of it, and it's like, and all that, we'll just move it all around. And yeah, that looks right.
Yeah.
Should we move on to their rules then? So they have an ability called the Bitter End. So when determining which players control a neutral objective marker, Iron Warriors, Infantry, and Walker models count their tactical strength as one higher than normal. In addition, when determining who controls an objective marker in a deployment zone, Iron Warriors, Infantry, and Walkers count their tactical strength as 2 higher than normal if within their own deployment zone. Legions Imperialis is a game about capturing objectives. Certainly that is the way that it works at the moment. And that rule basically means pound for pound, they are just outright better at taking objectives, but also holding objectives and contesting objectives. You need less people to do the work of more. It's not a flashy ability. I don't think it's, a particularly sexy ability. And I think that really sums up the Iron Warriors, to be honest, in quite a lot of fashion. But I feel like this is a rule which wins games. Your aggressive units, if you put 8 Marines against 8 Marines and you're trying to take their home objective with him, that's an extra 16 tactical strength over what your opponent has, which means that to hold that objective, they would need to bring in, probably another detachment to get close to what that what they would normally need. I don't think it's an S tier, but I think it's a solid A.
It's damn close, yeah.
I think that when it comes to abilities which win games and are always going to be useful, this is pretty good. The only downside is it's only infantry and walkers which can benefit from it. So, you can't, your vehicles won't do it, but you just build around it. I mean, there's so many transport options now with Spartans, Land Raiders, Storm Eagles, Thunderhawks. You just build around it and use it as a force, which basically goes in and takes an objective off somebody and sits on it and goes, okay, we'll take it back off me now. It's going to be really hard to uproot them, especially if they're sat in an objective which is in terrain or something.
And most attachments have kind of core units, right? So you're going to need to be taking infantry for a lot of builds, quote unquote, that a lot of lists that you choose to do, unless you're like kind of leaning into one kind of play style.
Yeah.
So yeah, God, it's good, isn't it? That's real good.
Yeah, I think it's really. Like I said, I don't think it's an S. I think it's probably close. I think that there's other rules which are probably S.
The things that you'll have to ask yourself, right, is that are these additional rules that we're going to read out in a bit, are they going to contribute kind of equally, I guess, to the extra OC from the Iron Warrior? So are you going to be able to remove more or enough troops so that their kind of extra OC gets leveled out, right? That's what you're hoping for those higher S tier ones. Is that
I'm going to stick it in S.
Okay, all right.
The more I think about it, it's probably the least circumstantial of rules. It's something you're always going to want to do. It's something you're always going to need to do. It's going to be relevant every single turn. And it's something you can absolutely build a force around. So as far as rules go for which rules is going to make me win a game, I think it's S.
Yeah.
I think it might be S. Leave your thoughts in the comments as our first S, and we'll use that as our benchmark. It's so on the cusp. I could swing either way, S or A. Yeah. I think I'm happy with that.
It's just good, isn't it? It's just so it's not a.
It's got nothing to do with the fact that I want to do them in Legions Imperialis on this.
I was going to say, exactly. It's not like the rules are, S I think is fair, but like you, I could go either way with them. I think we'll realize kind of it's worth more once we read out and think about the rest. I think S is a good choice. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 down, another 7 to go. So Night Lords, the Batman, Night Lords, the Legion 8 is it Heavy Bolters? The
Heavy Bolters,
Legion 7.
That's never going to get old. Damn, a lot of people don't like Night Lords.
Don't talk to Matt about Night Lords.
Don't talk to Matt about Night Lords. But sorry, Matt, I do like Night Lords. Damn. Kind of my first introduction to them was the Night Lords trilogy by Aaron Dembski Bowden, and I think I've said this before. I love those books because, the Night Lords obviously are arseholes, and we'll get onto kind of why they've got such a bad reputation. But those books truly showed you what Space Marines are, which are essentially still children that have just been genetically bolstered to have the bodies of adults, right? They are just little fucking babies, and it's captured so well in those books compared to the others. They're just so unaware of human emotion. They've never gone through puberty or anything like that. They are kind of almost naught but machines in terms of their kind of social ability for the most part, at least. Obviously, there always are some exceptions.
But they are Space Marines in their most base nature, aren't they?
And yeah,
Because
these are just killing
like,
machines.
you look at the Blood Angels as an example, right? When they were the
Mm.
Revenants before Sanguinius came along,
Mm.
probably a lot of kind of similarities with Blood Angels between Night Lords,
Mm-hmm.
the Revenants, and to an extent War Dogs, or
So
the World Eaters. But that kind of they became like Sanguinius molded them into what they are now. But the civility, the beauty, the creativity, and the culture is like this veneer, which kind of it surrounds what they
I
are
would
really at their core.
I would argue that although the Blood Angels could be viewed very similarly, theirs is like a genetic defect, whereas the Night Lords just come from a world that is like they come from the world of Nostromo, which is shrouded in night. It's constantly nighttime. It is at least the way I've pictured it is like a grimy, cyberpunky, dystopian like hellscape. Maybe not as cyberpunky, but just like this like shit heap of a planet.
Sort of like
Um,
if a hive world met Blade Runner is kind of
yeah, but just less neon, right?
yeah. I don't know.
Um,
I think the neon's well placed.
Honestly, I think can you imagine fucking Kurz like just perched in like a fucking hologram or something? It'd be sick.
Yeah,
Anyway,
outside a bar which says "girls, girls, girls" at the front.
yeah.
It's just him kind of up there,
So
like
yeah,
waiting.
dude is like the cross between so Conrad Kurz is their Primarch, right? And this guy is the cross between Batman and the Predator, right? Like he's scaling rooftops at night, and he wants to make Nostromo lawful and not a place where like it's normal just to step outside your door and like get murdered or have some other horrific crime happen to you, right? So Kurz wants to clean it up, and um, basically becomes the law himself, full of judge dread, judge, jury, executioner, but mostly just executioner, really, and will like horrifically. And I obviously can't say too much about to the extent of what they would do, but they would, dismember and disembowel other of criminals and display their remains
To
in
say
very
he makes an
public.
example of them is kind of a bit
Yeah,
of an understatement.
yeah, like they are terror manifest. That's their deal, right? They are the sneaky marines that just rely on terror tactics. There's like this adage, and I can't remember which book it's from, right? But Kurz's entire idea is that if I scare them enough, fear is a strong enough control method that you can like just hold planets in your grasp without having to set foot on the ground. Like they will absolutely despoil one planet in a system or in like a like a kind of a close sector, and every other planet in that just arms up. They surrender immediately. That it's his kind of thing of like, I do this like one horrific act to spare war and death and destruction on a Astartes level, which is huge because Astartes are just weapons. They are just killing machines, just biological and designed by the Emperor. Um, Obviously, it's fucked up logic, and he takes it way too far. The Legion itself are, because they are recruited from Nostromo, they are recruited from the criminal underbelly of the world, which is the entire world. And so the Marines, even before they become Space Marines, are little psychopaths. So there's stories of like most Marines having to like kill multiple people for food before they're and they get inducted young, and they've still done that before they've even been picked up by the recruiters. So yeah, they're real good at fighting. They're really good at fighting in the dark because they come from a planet where their eyes have kind of adapted to the darkness. And yeah, their job is basically to just make an example of of one person or world or army to make 20 other fall in line.
They're like the kind of opposite. I suppose the closest example of a similar legion is probably the Alpha Legion. But
Mm.
whereas the Alpha Legion use subtlety, coercion, and play a long game, like the Night Lords are the terrorists. They are the monsters in the dark, really.
Yeah, they are monsters. 100%. They are the boogeyman. Of
If
the
anybody was
setting.
going to, I mean, like when the Emperor sends, Kurz and his guys to Istvan to put down some traitors, I'm still to this day, my mind boggles as to why they didn't think, can I trust my legion of like ridiculous psychopaths, or maybe they might be in on it as well? Because if any of them were going to turn, it was going to be the Night Lords.
If the Horus Heresy is anything to go by, it's just the Emperor is not the best at making fucking decisions, like logical decisions. The dude is way too enraptured by his own kind of excellence that if he sends
Or
those
maybe
guys,
he thinks too far ahead that he doesn't see what's in front of him.
And I think
Perhaps.
like Kurz is like so flawed. He knows kind of when he's going to die, or at least he knows for certain that he's going to die. He keeps like foreseeing it.
He's one of the few, which is along with Sanguinius, who has that prescient psychic ability, doesn't he? Like the Empress apparently does as well.
And it drives him insane. And kind of towards even before he dies, like some. A very stellar character, Sevatar or Jago Sevatarin or something like that, the full name. But Sevatar almost has to completely take control of the Legion because he's going nuts in his room. Got kind of almost caught up in his own "I'm going to die one day." But yeah, they're the Legion of double standards, right? They are like the worst of the worst, but they think that they're upholding law and order, but they are the kind of the worst parts of the bad guys, I guess, because they don't need like the chaotic corruptions to become evil monsters that are feared. Even in 40k, very few of them are completely lost to the chaos source. They're usually quite human and grounded because they don't need it. They're psychopathic monsters. Just straight off the boat, So, yeah, yeah. But they do have their. I can see why people get quite. I think in the same vein that the Emperor's Children kind of have their one-trick pony nature throughout the books. Night Lords kind of suffer from it a little bit as well. Obviously, they very much have to be kind of typecast into their role, which is turn up, be scary, kill each other through infighting, leave, rinse, repeat.
And they are very much about the infighting, aren't they?
They love infighting.
Because they don't have that central commander who's keeping them all together. They literally fragment and go off and do their own things for the most part.
They're all backstabbers. They have no like close brotherly love to their squad mates.
It's barely a respect. They just about tolerate the chain of command, but even then, not so. And they will screw each other over if it means that they're going to be the. Is that what happens with the painted? Is he the painted count? I forget his name.
Yeah. This is like one of my favorite characters in the Heresy. So it is. Oh shit! The painted count. What's his full name? He's like very full of himself, and he thinks that he's basically been given command of like the
Gendor Strivok.
Gendor Skarivok, yes, the painted count, and he's given kind of control of the Night Lords elements that they've managed to wrangle to Terra somehow, and there is just this incredible scene of him getting absolutely fucking wrecked by shit.
Is it Raldoron?
Is it? Oh, I feel like it is Raldoron, right?
Is it Raldoron? It's either because it's not.
I want to say it's Imperial Fist, but I can't think of any Imperial Fist that would have actually been there. Yeah, it's Raldoron. It's surely Raldoron, right?
He says, scrolling over Lexiconum very, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, either way, while you're checking who it was, right?
It was Raldoron. It was Raldoron.
Nice.
We're good. We're good.
Lands on the wall, and he's got this demon blade. And obviously, as all demon blades do, they eventually fucking betray their owner because they're demons and they're assholes. Okay, so he's got this demon blade that's making him like really powerful, a really, really good fighter, and he gives this like long ass like speech, like I am Gendor Scrivok, the Flame Master of the blah 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 blah, and like just like this huge long title, and I am here to like deliver you your doom. And Raldoron's just like, never heard of you, and then proceeds to beat the living shit out of this guy. And the demon blade's like, oh, this is embarrassing, I'm out. So he just like loses all of his power.
He
and
gets
suddenly
thrown off the wall, doesn't he?
he gets thrown off the fucking first wall. It's so good. It's so good.
But then, you know, as he's laid there on the ground, he gets kind of basically he makes a deal with the blade, doesn't he? And is it like 500 years or something that he basically has to give over? And
then he'll be resurrected or some shit, right?
Yeah.
And like he immediately regrets it. Like the moment he like says it, he's like, oh shit, I fucked up. And then he's gone.
Yeah, he's like tortured for 500 years or something, but then he comes back as a demon prince. Yeah, I found him a very frustrating, but that was a really satisfying moment in the Horus Heresy.
I think the Night Lords are cool, and I still absolutely love that moment. Like that's like one of my favorite parts of the books. So funny.
So where are you landing then with their lore?
I think their lore is. I'm going to piss off a lot of Iron Warriors players by putting them in B.
You think it's that high?
I do, because I think they are assholes that are like paranoid and like moaning and whining and just like entirely unpleasant, just like the Iron Warriors, but like it works with them. Like it's written really well in their heresy books. Like,
and they do have a good book, Pharos as well. They're involved in Pharos, which is a great book, and they are some good lore there.
Right to kind of the end of the heresy as well. Pretty much, featured maybe not as heavily as some of the kind of core chapters, but they are like always there in the background, just getting up to crazy cool shit. There was a very cool cameo as well of a Night Lords from that 40k series in one of the Siege of Terror books, which was very cool. But I won't spoil that one. Yeah, I'm gonna say B. I think they are the Iron Warriors done right in some respects.
There's certainly enough nuance and intrigue, I think, with them. Even if they don't get quite as many big set pieces in the books, there's certainly things which make them interesting.
And I think the faults about them are less about them and more about like other people just trusting them to do anything, right? Like they are very much, this is what we are, this is what we do, and yet, pre-heresy and early heresy, people still think that they're going to do good shit. It's like, what are you expecting? So yeah, B.
Okay.
May change.
I think a lot of people will be thinking, I think you're going to get two camps here. I think you've gone safe with B.
Okay.
I think a lot of people will be shouting at them saying, fuck Night Lords, that needs to be C. And the Night Lords player will be shouting at you saying it needs to be higher.
I'm going to get a very angry message from Matt when this episode airs. It's like all capital letters. It'll be that copy and paste of I've got 100 confirmed kills and I'm coming to kill you.
So moving on to their rules then. So they have in Legions Imperialis a rule called Seeds of Dissent. If a Night Lord's model destroys an enemy model with the Commander or the Solar Auxiliary HQ special rule, each enemy detachment within 4 inches of the destroyed model suffers a number of hits equal to 3 times the starting wounds characteristic of the destroyed model. E.g., a model with a starting wounds characteristic of 1 would generate 3 hits. When making a save roll against these hits, models count their save characteristics as equal to their morale characteristic and cannot use any additional saves, such as invulnerable saves, cover saves, etc., nor can these hits be allocated to void shields. Models that are part of the detachment that is broken subtract 2 from the result of these saves. Knights, Titans, and models with a morale characteristic of X are unaffected by this rule. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this. I think it's dog shit, to be honest. I feel like they have tried to crowbar in, channel that kind of feeling into a rule, which doesn't really make a great deal of sense. There's 3 models in a average game, right, which you're going to kill potentially with this particular rule. If you have 3 formations, for instance. And it's a morale check. So Space Marines are getting a 3-up save on average, and even Legions Imperial, even Solar Auxilia models are getting a 4-up. Now, obviously, this gets better later on in the game when you've got broken detachments, and that becomes a 6-up or a 5-up. But even then, a 5-up is still the same. All you're getting is around 3, sometimes maybe more, automatic hits on a detachment within 4 inches of the unit. I just don't like it. I just don't really feel like it fits. I think it's a pretty lame application of that kind of rule. Thematically, it doesn't really work for me either. Yeah. I think that the problem is with these guys is that we'll come to it later, but it's the Raven Guard and the Alpha Legion rules exist, so they couldn't give it something similar to those two, which would kind of like work with that sort of sewing us. Like, to me, this should have been something like an ability to turn, a unit or something, or before the game starts, you select one unit and it takes, X amount of hits because they've been,
or
it's been sabotaged or butchered beforehand or something.
Or you just, say to me, that's more of an Alpha Legion ability. I say more, maybe you would just do the opposite of the Iron Warriors ability. And you have some kind of mechanism where if your units are
reduces their tactical
strength. Exactly. Or you take a page out of Horus Heresy's book release. I'm potentially going off the first edition here, but where if you outnumber your opponent, because they're kind of dirty fighters, right? The whole thing is that they'll go for the cheap shots, they'll surround you, they'll outnumber you.
They could suffer negatives to their morale roll.
Yeah, if you surround them, as in you outnumber them in like a close combat, all right, you might, it's not going to be active all game, but it's a little bit more balanced than just -1 to CAF. You get like bonuses to, bonus hits against the opponent or something like that for outnumbering them. Maybe by a scale of how much you outnumber them.
There's so much that they could have done with it. I mean, when you think about how powerful some of the abilities are, even just like having some sort of ability to affect morale rolls. Like, for instance, if you are trying to regroup as a result of a falling back from combat from them or something, it's harder to get back in the fight. You suffer a -2 morale roll when you're regrouping. Or when you've fallen back, it's harder. Your opponent is harder to, pass those morale checks and rally for the next round. There's so many things that they could have done in the game around morale without it just being like that rule feels more like a World Eaters-y rule, like the collateral damage surrounding the death of an HQ.
I mean, it's a cool rule. It sounds like when they were writing this, I bet they were like, yeah, we've, when they were just talking about this, is like, yeah, this is cool. This is like, killing, how do we kill an HQ and make it like impact the game more than it already does? And I think on paper, maybe this sounded a bit more fun and like a bit more unique, but in reality, it's just a little bit shit, really.
I don't know how much killing an HQ really. I mean, for Solar Auxilia players, it's obviously a much bigger consideration because you lose that chain of command ability. But for Marine players, you lose an HQ unit, and it's kind of like oh well, it's not
Which is,
that
I
big a
think,
deal.
the suffering of, unfortunately, Night Lords in any game system they're in, which is against Marine armies, they're gonna be shit because they care about leadership, and leadership in Marine armies is high. But if you ever go up against your Solar Auxilia player, or or if you're playing 40k, you're like Guardsman player, suddenly you're like, oh, now my army is finally doing what it says on the tin, So I think they definitely, it's a hard legion to make rules for sure, narratively at least.
And we have to remember as well that we don't know what the future plans are for the legions, and these may even change as soon as the Talon book when that comes out. But as of the time that we're recording this, there is just the legion rules in the books for each legion to go off of. And again, this is one where I feel like you have to have like your whole army made up of Night Lords to get the most out of this particular rule, to make sure that when you are killing that HQ unit, it's a Night Lords unit that does it. So it doesn't lend itself to taking it as a separate formation. It almost penalizes you for taking more than one type of formation. Yeah, I not for me. I'm sorry. I think I think that I think it's one of the worst.
I'm still going to make them my allied force in legions.
Well, because they're cool, and
they're cool.
If you like Night Lords, that should be the only reason that brings you them. And the way that you're going to kill most HQ units realistically is probably going to be in some sort of close combat,
right?
Getting in and wiping them out, because they'll always be the last unit that somebody takes off of the board. If you're shooting at them, for instance. So,
Skyhunter Night Lords with a Thunderhawk full of Assault Marines or something. Just drop them somewhere and see if we kill a HQ or two.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cool.
But yeah, I'm just like, you have to jump through so many hoops to make it potentially work.
Okay, let's move on now to the 4th Legion of 9. Nearly halfway there. Over an hour in, we've got this. So the 12th Legion, the World Eaters, Angron's boys.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, these dudes are cool, right? So I guess, from the start, these are your Khorne Berserkers. These are your melee focused legion. They were implanted, or Angron, in these slave pits that he was basically his pod landed on a planet that had like a massive slave. Is it Nuceria?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna got that completely wrong, but yeah. And then they had to all fight in the gladiatorial pits, right? The gladiatorial arenas, and they had this like over race of or overseer kind of human, like upper class that forced them to fight in these gladiatorial pits, and they would implant each one of them with what's essentially like an archaeotech device, like ancient technology, called the butcher's nails, which basically gets plugged into their brain, and it makes them feel like nothing but pain until they're like fighting or causing pain, and then it like abates. So they are like constantly just like angry and like on the verge of just breaking into intense violence, because they have this just like drilling pain in their head that only stops when they draw blood. And when Angron was found by the Legion, he basically forced all of his Legion to also take on the Butcher's Nails, or at least they.
I don't know did he force them or did they
force them, but they chose to.
It?
Yeah, I just realized that no, they chose to adopt it, which insane. Librarians, like one librarian tried and fucking blew up, so the librarians were like, yeah, no, we shouldn't do that because it fucks with our minds. Entire Legion takes these up. So obviously, much like I guess the Night Lords, these were just clear examples of a Legion that was going to go Traitor. You know, these guys were hated before the heresy even started. They were untrustworthy because they would just go off into blind rampages. You know, there was no peaceful
They accidentally
solution.
destroyed kind of like their own allies, didn't they? Occasionally and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
when they went
they'd go
into
into
a
these
bit of
like
a frenzy.
blood frenzies and like you know, any kind of fellow Astartes or you know, infantry, especially Solar Auxilia, that were with them would just be blenderized by them. So yeah, these guys are just psychos. They're prime for the picking by Khorne, the god of blood and murder, which is, you know, why they do so well on the heresy. They can be a bit one-dimensional. Again, it's the same thing of like and I think it's important to remember that every legion has its thing, right? So, you know, it's good to, I guess, be careful not to say that everyone's one dimensional, because they are meant to be kind of playing into their thing. But these guys are just, we are always angry, and everything is about how much we just want to beat the shit out of the person we're talking to whenever we go to a character with internal monologue, right?
But don't you think that the juxtaposition, though, come with these guys comes from where they are in 40k to what they were in 30k? And I know that there is still very much a kind of like I'm a berserker kind of thing going on with them, but there is some moments in there. Like, what is that? There's an apothecary, a world eater's
Yes.
apothecary, who is
Yes.
like a sworn brother of
Shit.
what's his name? The guy who becomes the chapter master of the Flesh Terrors.
Fuck, how, like, all of these just leave my head. Yes, because they have a really sick story. So they have world eaters, when they have their gladiatorial pits, they have like a pit brother as well, where when they go into these fighting pits they get chained to someone else. And yeah, go
Nasir
on.
Amit was the Blood Angel.
Amit, yeah. And yeah, very rarely would they have like someone that wasn't within their legion as their like blood brother to go in the fighting pits. But yeah, but Amit was. And yeah, so there are like some really,
But Amit was a Blood Angel, and Revenants
yes.
were very, very similar to the
Hmm.
World Eaters before they became the Blood Angels.
I think
It's
that's
just
part
the
of why
Blood
they
Angels
fought so well
became
together.
civilized, whereas the World Eaters devolved due to the Butcher's nails. But going back to what I was saying about that kind of juxtaposition, like Khan, the Betrayer, as a character in 40k is very much a slathering, drooling berserker maniac. But then you kind of go back to the 30k era, you know, and he doesn't fully give over to Khorne sort of straight away.
He was the
And every
brains of
time,
the organization, right? Like he was
yeah,
the one that was there keeping Angron on leash, basically, even before the heresy.
but I think some of his moments as well, Khan's moments, are just really well written in the lore. Like you can almost hear him kind of grinding through his teeth as he tries to sort of maintain this control over the rage. And certainly latterly, he keeps getting like these flashes of like ultra violence when he's trying to talk to people. Until ultimately, again, I don't know if we should say what happens to Khan.
Leave it
If it
for
might be a
the
little bit close. Well, we've said this is a spoiler heavy episode, right? So
true.
I think, you know, I will just say there's a spoiler that I'm going to say right now, and you should probably skip forward 10 seconds if you do. But he is killed by Sigismund with the Black Blade. Obviously, he comes back later. But, you know, that duel is awesome. It's an amazing fight between them. And I love the way that his character interacted with what's her face, Saren,
Yeah,
Latara Saren.
Latara Saren, the ship mistress of,
Yeah.
yeah,
What was her flagship? Oh, the Conqueror.
Conqueror. That's it.
Yeah.
Fire the Ursus claws. Fucking
But
iconic.
that you know, that's that human amongst them who holds such sort of area of high esteem, you know, and how she works, you know, and deals with Khan on a daily basis is just, I think I think these are for me, the World Eaters feel like they should be super duper 2-dimensional in what they do, but I think that the way that they've been written and the cast which supports them makes for a really interesting story. And there's definitely an element of pity when it comes to Angron. And what kind of happened to him. There's that flashback, isn't there, where Archenland is with the Emperor to see if he can identify the Archaeotech, which is driving the Butcher's nails. And Angron's just laid on a slab, and he's like, we could take it off, but it would kill him. So he leaves it in. And I think he's just a tortured individual. It's really interesting kind of seeing that. And there is some amazing moments where Angron, he like full on Master Chiefs into the Siege of Terror.
Yeah. Yeah, dude is going nuts on the Siege of Terror. It's so funny.
It's when he literally like comes down like a fucking comet as he throws himself out of a ship and like re-enters the atmosphere and smashes into the ground outside of the gates of the palace.
Quite literally the Red Angel. Yeah.
It's amazing. And the duel, of course, that he has with Sanguinius, and the pair of them is epic as well. I feel like, they're like the opposite of Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children started off really interesting and intriguing and became more 2-dimensional, whereas the World Eaters started off more 2-dimensional and gained a lot of depth as the rest of the series went on.
And also we had the world's greatest bromance imaginable between Khan and Argyle.
Yeah.
Which we'll get onto in the word bearer section, but that's just like a very, very cool storyline. Again, some excellent moments in that book at the end when he starts beating on the most hated character in the Horus Heresy, Erebus, is such a satisfying moment. And that's kind of displaying Khan as very much still keeping it together, and being that kind of guide to Angron right till the end. Because I mean, Angron kind of towards the last few books, he's not Angron anymore. As much as you could really say that he was much
he's
of
gone.
a person.
He's become something else. He is a god basically at that point, and his interests are beyond his legion.
Like they have to keep him like trapped in a labyrinth essentially until they need to release him on the battlefield, because he is such a danger. Like he would just rampage through the Conqueror, just killing all of the serfs on like anything he'd come across basically.
Isn't there a scene where literally they end up like having to lock off whole sections of it because all of the World Eaters are just going mental?
Yeah, so the funny thing is they trap. So oh god, here we go. So Perturabe makes the Iron Labyrinth to break Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders. It's not called the Iron Labyrinth, it's called something else, right?
I think it's just called the Labyrinth, isn't it?
Maybe it's the Iron Labyrinth. It creates this horrific labyrinth that's like impossible to solve, full of deadly traps and all this sort of shit. Creates it for Kurz initially, right? Or does Kurz create it? They stick Vulcan in there, and basically, long story short, there's this shit-tiered labyrinth that's amazing, and they stick Angron in it because they literally cannot leave him on the ship because he would just like chew through the ship and all of its crew. And like there's a scene in that where he's just like given up solving the labyrinth and is just like somehow impossibly punching through the walls of this like heavily fortified labyrinth just to draw like a line through so there's no like turning or anything like that. To get him off ship or out of the labyrinth, I think Khan have to like lock on like a teleporter onto him. I just jump on his back or something and stab that.
Is it when he escapes from the labyrinth? That's when he full on re-enters into. Is that what, I don't know if I'm misremembering that.
Yeah.
Anyway, where are we thinking then with our lore
they're badass
perspective?
They're really cool. They have some of the best written bits in the book that I could go on forever about. The scene with Khan and Janisha Kroll, the Silent Sister, is just iconic because it's just so good. There's just so many good stuff. I'm gonna say A. I think that they're cool. They're not actually one of my favorite legions, but like they very little. They very. There's very much not right about them. Like it works for them. They suit their vibe, much like I think the Night Lords do. They play their weaknesses very well, written wise.
I'm not going to disagree with that. I would have put them in A myself. I think that they're just always interesting to read about, and that they're involved in some really great bits of lore, some really great books written by some really great authors. Yeah, I would probably have to say some of my favorite moments in the Heresy are about these guys. So yeah, I will say A as well. Happy with that. From a rules perspective, so they've got like a surprisingly tiny little section, but they have incarnate violence. Really, it just does what it says on the tin. Whenever they make a fight roll, all world eaters, infantry, cavalry, and walker models can reroll a single d6 when making fight rolls. I can't underestimate how good that is in a combat, because Space Marines have got a good CAF anyway, right? You throw in Terminators as well with I think it's +5 for a Terminator, and then Dreadnoughts and stuff like that as well with those really high CAF rolls. It kind of makes them impossible to beat in close combat, because the moment that you roll a duff roll, you pick up one of the dice and you roll it again, and hopefully you get higher. And in that circumstance there, it makes it's a force multiplier. You take that over Rend or any of those abilities, because it doesn't matter what rules you've got. If you roll duff dice, you're not gonna win a combat. But you pick up that one and throw it again. Okay, you might only get a 2, but it was one better than it was before. And really, it helps you roll those average numbers more often, rather than oh no, I've rolled 1 and a 2, I'm on a 3, which means my CAF is 6, or something. You can pick up that 1 and roll it again, and you might roll a 4, and it's I think it's one of the best abilities in the game. I don't think that is S. I'm going to put it in as A. And the reason why I'm going to put it in as A is it's obviously you have to get a charge off. And I'm going in and out of focus again. I don't know what that is. My camera's been a bit weird. You have to get a charge off, which as more and more expansions come out, I think that is becoming harder. People kind of know how to screen units a little bit better now than perhaps they did when they started, with vehicles that aren't moving. But also, point defense was largely overlooked at the start, whereas now it's becoming very much, like a point defense, a bit of a point defense meta. And so defense against charges becomes a little bit better as well, because you're throwing your normal BS, well, not BS, but you're to hit when you're overwatching, or you can shoot at stuff as you move with another unit. So although I think it is very powerful, the only reason I don't think it's S is because it's not, you're obviously going to build your force around it, and you're going to try and get those charges off as much as possible. It probably will win you games, but I think that there's definitely things that you can do to mitigate that to some degree, depending on what your list is. And obviously, if they've got nothing to charge because you're a drop pod assault or something, or outflanking, then it's, there's sort of less, you get less gain out of it. But I do think it's very, very strong. I do think it's one of the best Legion abilities out there. So for me, that's an A.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll do one more, then we'll take a short break, shall we? So we'll do the Death Guards next, the 14th Legion Mortarians.
Ooh, yes, our favourite
boys.
stinky boys. Okay, yeah, these guys are like really, really filthy. No, okay, let's. So these guys are like categorized, I guess, in 40k, and are very well known for having their plague marines. They are the Nurgle infected or infested marines. They are disgustingly resilient, and that traces all of its way back, pre-heresy. They come from all the way to pre-heresy. Apologies. They come from a world called Barbarous, which is a toxic hellscape. Um, those that lived on the planet had to be kind of strong to survive. And again, even before the kind of fall to chaos, Mortarion would have like little rituals. I think I remember very distinctly when one becomes like a captain or a higher rank, you have to take a draft of basically concocted poisons created by Mortarion, and these poisons, severely injure, or can kill Space Marines, which kind of shows to their potency, right? Because Space Marines have a lot stronger physiology and organs specifically designed to filter out toxins. So they have a kind of a thing with poison and resilience, and I guess they kind of share that ideal with the Iron Warriors, with their kind of like just foot slogging through the shit heap, through the trenches, putting up with like
Don't complain. Get on
no
with it.
complaints, getting on with it.
Inevitable.
Whereas the Iron Warriors constantly complain about it, these guys embrace it, right? They love it. They love a good kind of uh, ground out, protracted war. And yeah, they had a love of using chemical weapons and other kind of chemical attacks against their opponents. So yeah, these are just the nastiest boys. Obviously, prime candidates for Papa Nurgle himself. They stock.
Although they did last out a
They
long time, didn't they? Really, it wasn't Mortarion who kind of orchestrated that.
no.
This is again where you see the power of those first captains, and
Mm-hmm.
Typhon, as he originally was, kind of really sort of spinning the wheel on that.
Such a like a theatre kid thing to do, to change your name to Typhus from Typhon. um, yeah, there was a definitely a very kind of heavy ideological difference between Typhon, the first captain, and his Primarch Mortarion. Mortarion, like quite a lot of the traitors throughout the heresy, both Primarch and not, were very against the use of warp powers and like demonic powers. Seeing them as kind of cheap and the way to kind of get something done quickly. Whereas Mortarion's kind of idea was just kind of unrelenting, do it properly, even if it's going to be slow and grudging. And this just seemed
Well,
like
he was one of the big voices at Nicaea,
yeah,
wasn't he?
hated
Like speaking out.
sorcery, hated psychers, spoke out against the Thousand Sons, who eventually became their allies, and yeah, became a demon prince after Typhon kind of stitched him up a little.
Yeah, because he had to give himself over, didn't he? Because basically his legion was just going to be destroyed, and I think they were caught in the warp, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, he eventually gave in to Nurgle if it would save the rest of his legion, as is kind of a little bit of a common theme on a couple of legions. But
yeah, and I think he presents quite Mortarion would present quite similarly to Perturabo, but deep down, Mortarion very much cared about his legion as a whole. So I think there was definitely like a lot of hesitance to to embrace anything like that. And yeah, very 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 heavily featured later on in the Heresy as well. Again, I think quite similar to the World Eaters. They, they had their kind of time to shine a lot later on in the books. Although I guess the Death Guard were obviously quite, especially the Loyalist Death Guard were quite integral at the start. I think they really shown at the kind of the finale and Siege of
And
Terror.
touching on that point, you can't really pass up on the Death Guard without talking about Nathaniel Garrow.
Of course. Oh yeah, the Loyalist Death Guard captain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolute. They a lot of the, I guess, a lot of the traitor forces that were involved in. Oh, remind me, what's the betrayal? Not Calf.
Istvan.
Istvan. They really kind of, I guess they really were had a lot better lore on their kind of like loyalist side. There was a lot more focus on like these key characters, so like Garrow and Loken from the Sons of Horus, and that was where kind of the focus of those earlier books was. So when kind of like the more traitorous elements got pushed heavily towards the latter part of the series, just they start to get really interesting, and you see how kind of each of them has their own distinctive fall, and Death Guards is much like their kind of demonic patron and their ideology. It was kind of like a slow and steady corruption where they didn't really notice or realize it, and they were kind of lost in it a little bit as well. Very very kind of away. I can't think of a better way to say away with the fairies. They were very much lost to the grandeur of Nurgle. Everything seemed to be, uh, very very pleasant to them when actually, they had like very horrific things happening to their own bodies, let alone their brothers around them. So yeah, very very interesting Legion. One that I'm very neutral about in terms of like wanting to collect in any system either. Although zombies are cool. I guess everyone likes zombies, and yeah, they are the zombie guys. But yeah, any thoughts lore wise from yourself? Well, obviously, I know that your boys, the White Scars, had a little tiff with.
I mean, that was the only thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
The epic showdown between Mortarion and Jagatai at the Lionsgate Spaceport is one of the most iconic battles between Primarchs. It's up there, I think. How he is banished basically back to the warp by Khan. It's just that whole set piece is just great, with the everything from bringing down the orbital defense plate to kind of shield those tanks as they kind of ride across the desert kind of wasteland of Mad Max style towards the Lionsgate Spaceport.
Yeah.
And then the ensuing battle that happens when they get there. Like it's and then also then Typhus was there at the Hollow Mountain. The fight between the Dark Angels and them as well. Like it's, I recall, I think it's either the first or second End in the Death book. There is a conversation between some captains of the Death Guard, and they kind of understand and appreciate what's happened to them. But there's still a little bit of a human aspect there still, which was good to kind of crowbar that back in a game because they do come across as just husks otherwise, like potentially unfairly.
Yeah, and I think yeah, they can be quite characterful. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at with like the later on in the series, you kind of see that character come through because, like you said, they are essentially zombies to Nurgle at this point, right? Yeah, it's just very 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 cool, very solid. I don't think anything necessarily too exciting from a narrative front, but no like major gripes with them with them either. To be honest, I think they're just well
They
rounded.
sort of personify the inevitability
Mm.
of the Horus heresy. Like we've said in the past, like the Horus heresy is like watching a car crash in slow motion because you kind of know what the end result is. It's just about how they get there, and I think that the Death God very much personify that inevitable coming of the end. You know, even from just like what they personify with Nurgle, you know, death comes for everybody in the end. Yeah, I think as a Primarch, Mortarion isn't as interesting as a lot of the other Primarchs, but I feel like their Legion has a lot of interesting nuance to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I think they are solid midpoint contenders for that lovely B.
Look at us riding the middle there,
I
and
know it's a good curve at the moment though.
yeah, three in the middle, one at the top,
Yeah.
one at the bottom. We can go down still. We can go up a little bit. So so rules wise, they have in Legions Imperialis a rule called Sons of Barbarous. So Death Guard detachments do not suffer hits from moving through dangerous terrain. In addition, at the start of the battle, before any detachments are deployed, a player may pick up to at least two. Sorry, may pick up to at least. No, a player may pick up to 2 areas of terrain if their army contains at least one Death Guard formation. For the remainder of the battle, these areas count as dangerous terrain, in addition to any other rules that apply. 2 structures can be selected in place of a single area of terrain. Each time a model garrisons or leave a structure designated as dangerous terrain, it counts as having moved 1 inch through it. I think that this is a really nice rule. As we start seeing more terrain types being used, dangerous terrain comes around a little bit more often. I think that rivers, for instance, are counted as dangerous terrain. Being able to move through that without risking any hits is pretty decent. It's pretty good. The selection of 2 areas of terrain to make dangerous, I think that is useful. You can use it for area denial of certain areas, and I would be using this for like objectives. You know, if there happens to be an objective in or close to ideally in a piece of terrain, if it happens that that's how the board's set up, making that whole area around that that objective's dangerous terrain is, you know, it plays into your hands, or even, you know, in your own area. Like if you are holding a key objective and you're sat inside some area terrain with your objective, making that dangerous, which means if anybody wants to come at you, then they're going to be taking hits to do so. Obviously, everybody other than Death Guard are going to be impacted by this. So it's something you have to think about as well when you are playing with a mixed Legion force. But I do see this similarly to the ability of Fulgrim's boys, the Emperor's Children. This is something I think that you get the most out of as a second formation, as like a bolt-on rule to something more significant later on. So because of that, I think that this is better than the Emperor's Children one, but I think it's probably a B because it's one of those use it once at the start of the game abilities. For me, again, you know, you can mitigate stuff as a player if you need to, if you face against this, but it's something you have to consider. And, you know, you may well be affected by it, but you might also, it might not have any effect on the game at all, depending on what you select and what your opponent's taken and all that kind of stuff. But I think as having a second piece of Legia rules up your sleeve, I think from a traitor position, this is a good one. So sticking it as a B.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? It's like I like it because it's very narratively linked. I like the idea of, you know, tox gassing a building by an objective and then sending Death Guard to go and deal with the dangerous terrain because they can, you know, deal with it a little bit better. But yeah, it's not Iron Warriors. You're going through a lot of hoops to secure an objective a bit better, as opposed to just naturally being able to do it anyway. Yeah, I think B is a solid answer as well.
Okay, so let us know how we're getting on so far in the comments. I think this is all right. I'm looking at this. There's nothing which at the moment, I think this is coming together quite nicely. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a very short break and we're going to just talk about some of the sponsors of our show for the next few minutes, and then we're going to come back and finish off with the last four boys as well. So with that note, here's a little note from our sponsors.
In a world where war games reign supreme, one name stands above the rest. Battle Bling, your ultimate destination for high-quality, 3D printed accessories. Whether you're seeking an upgrade kit or the finest weapon arms, Battle Bling has it all. With hundreds of products in store, we've got something for every wargame enthusiast. Battle Bling, choose your weapon.
Okay, so as we mentioned at the start of the show, we've got a couple of slots open for some additional sponsors. So we are on the lookout for people who want to join our Patreon as a sponsor of Maximal Fire. As part of what we offer, we are here to kind of help our sponsors kind of get the news out about their stuff. And, every one of them that we have so far is very much hobby adjacent to what we're doing. So we've picked our sponsors well to really showcase different areas of the hobby, and also to go in tandem with the games that we support in the form of Adeptus Titanicus and Legions Imperialis. So Battle Bling, they've been with us since the start. If you don't know who Battle Bling are, they sell a plethora of different 3D printed upgrade parts for the most part. They also are the kings of the Warbreaker Titan, which is the massive, great big Titan, which they do every now and again. I don't think we're going to get this podcast out in time for Warbreaker Phase 3 release date, but do keep an eye on the Warbreaker release dates if you want one of those magnificently huge centerpiece models in your collection at some point. Just some quick shout outs from them. They're going to be setting up a Patreon in the next, some point during this year. So that promises to bring lots of goodies with that as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of interest to a lot of people. And they'll also be setting up a Patreon related Discord server as well in the future. So if you like all things bling, that's certainly something to keep an eye out for going forwards. They've also got a load of new releases at the moment. They've released some Legions Imperialis upgrade bits. So if you don't really like the bases which come with your standard Legions Imperialis models, they've just released their Streets of Death range, which has your standard circular bases for normal infantry troops, but then they also do some rectangular ones as well, which fit tanks if you're somebody who likes to model your tanks on a base. And that's all been modeled by one of their new sculptors called Finbar. And talking of Finbar, you probably will have seen his Titans if you've seen any photos from any beachhead event that we've done in the last few years. He's quite a wizard when it comes to kind of coming up with custom parts, and has one of the nicest custom Legios I think I've certainly ever seen. And one of the other things that they've released at the moment is it's like a gun tail for a warhound, which is ridiculous and awesome in kind of equal measures, I think. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, I've got it.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you
Kind
go.
enough to give us one last speechhead, and
Of course he did. Yes.
Yeah. So I stole all of the traitory bits from the collection.
That's right. We divvied them up, didn't we?
We divvied them up. Yeah, I got all the cool bits. Obviously, nice job. And yes, they are definitely going to be on some up and coming project Warhounds at some point.
Yeah, very cool.
Very sick.
And then the other, I guess, Legions and AT related news from them on the new releases is they've just updated their arm upgrades for the Porphyrian Knights to a new version of the conversion beamer. So if you want a cheaper alternative to upgrade an existing Castus Porphyrian to an Asterius, then you can buy the shoulder arm pieces for that rather than buying the one from Heritage Forge Worlds. There's also a couple of bits and pieces coming out for Horus Heresy. If you follow those, all courtesy of the designers their designers, or the designer, Artisans of All. So again, another prolific sculptor who sells us on a few different sites. But blast shields for tanks and different alternative vent exhausts for rhinos and stuff. It's really cool. As always, Battlebling kind of bringing out tons and tons of new stuff on a pretty regular basis. I think the Warbreaker will take a lot of the showcasing for the next few weeks, though, I imagine.
Oh, it deserves to. It's a monster, isn't it?
It's a monster, and it takes hundreds of hours to print one, apparently. So it's often all guns to the all crew to the guns sort of thing.
Russia's rise with guns massive in size, engines of war roughly 8mm scale, plastic giant robots, they're on sale, a tabletop war game with plastic modular scenery frames, city crushers from Troublemaker Games, city crushers catchy slogan goes there.
Troublemaker Games is one of our other sponsors. It's been a while since we've had any sort of real news from Troublemaker Games, but this comes at a great time. They had a Kickstarter a couple of months ago, whereby they were they did a campaign for some plastic city plinths, which are like areas which raise areas of your terrain you can put buildings on. It's also compatible with making like different style roofs. It's compatible entirely with all of the their other range of plastic kits. I've still haven't painted it, but like I used a lot of their stuff to create a giant wall section, which was the intention for Legions Imperialis. And I'm hoping that we can get that done for our next event in August, which reminds me, Johnny, we need to get the tickets up for our event on the 17th of August.
We do indeed.
We do. But as well as those plinths, they've also released a load of plastic alternative bases as well. So you're a bit spoiled for choice, really, if you want alternative bases. We've got the stuff from Battlebling. But in the next couple of weeks, the Troublemaker Games plastic base range will be being released. There's two varieties of these. There's ones which have like the inlaid holes for like Heritage Epic models, when they had little bases. And then there's the ones more similar to Legions Imperialis, which is just the flat sort of molded designed bases. They look kind of quite similar to the Legions Imperialis ones, but there's a lot more sort of different alternatives in there. So I think that they'll mesh and gel very well with the Legions Imperialis stuff. But the best thing about these is purely the value for money from them, because the ones with the infantry sockets, that's 20. They do them in 25 mil, 16 different types of bases, and you get 80 bases for 15 quid, which is obviously cheaper than 3D printed versions. But in the other versions they do without the infantry sockets, at 25, 32, 40 mil disc bases, and you get 5 sprues of 15. So the 40 mil, you get 40 25 millimeter ones to a sprue. Is it sprue? It might be sprue, or it might be 5 sprues equals. No, it's got 40 25 mils, 10 32 mils, and 10 40 mils as well. I think that's probably per sprue. But one of the really cool things that they have released is a flight stand upgrade pack, basically, which will turn any type of base into a flight stand. So it's just a little thing that you stick in the middle and you can stick a flight stand in it, which I think is ingenious. And that's going to be coming with that too. I did forget, actually, Battlebling are bringing out their flight stand extenders, so you can have super high flyers, which is quite cool. I may well be using both of those in conjunction with one another to get some nice, interesting bases. Because I think the problem with the flyers at the moment for GW is that there's only one design, isn't there, for
so low
the flight stand at that 40 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that'll be good to have those and add a bit of difference into the mix.
Yeah, the Battle Bling boys were balancing Thunderhawks on their extended flight stands at the last event, weren't they? Quite spectacularly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're very, very sick.
But then, yeah, their plinths pack as well will be out soon. I understand that the Kickstarter is going to be shipping quite soon as well, and for that you get 10 plastic modular plinths for 30 quid. So each sprue makes a section roughly 10 centimeters by 30 centimeters. It's all compatible, I should say, to make it as big or as little as you want. I've been on the lookout for these plinth things for a while. We got the stuff from War Games Forged, didn't we? Which again is more terrain that I need to paint to kind of add that little bit of the bit of height to the boards in places, even subtle height. So I think that the combination of that with some of the raised stuff that Grimdark Terrain has released and some of the stuff from Troublemaker Games will, when all put together, will make for a really interesting kind of narrative themed board, which is a bit more interesting than just a load of flat buildings.
Oh yeah.
Last but not least, Grimdark Terrain. If you don't know who Grimdark Terrain are, they are one of the premier companies selling STLs designed pretty much exclusively for the Legions Imperialis and AT hobby. And every month he puts out a pack of new terrain, and this stuff's like Lego. You know, you acquire these packs over a number of months, and it's all interchangeable with one another. A lot of it is kind of compatible as well with the GW plastic kits. I would say probably a good 40% of the terrain that we own is Grimdark Terrain, I would say. And if you've seen any photos of any AT events, chances are you've seen some of the Grimdark Terrain stuff. So his June pack is out now. It will be bringing in things like gantries, repair bays, and all of these can be kind of mixed and stacked with the existing parts provided or with the GW plastic kits. So as always, Grimdark Terrain, I think if you are a 3D printer, he does like a monthly membership program, and that's how you get access to it. And there's sign up for that. There's a lot of content that you can accumulate for a very good value. Okay, is there any more sponsor news that we wanted to mention, or shall we dive straight back into it with a little bit more of the old Legio chat?
I reckon we dive straight back in.
Okay, let's go then.
Let's go.
So, let's go.
Let's go. Right, come on, we can do this.
Next up,
So many legions, and we love them all.
there is. We're doing well. I
think we're
I thought
doing
we were
well.
going to take longer than this.
Yeah, we're having a good time.
The 15th Legio, 1,000 Suns.
Hell yeah. They are your Psyker-based legion, right? These guys are known for their almost, kind of rivaled power with using their kind of their psychic abilities, their warp power, which way before the heresy even really began, caused a lot of friction within the Imperium. Emperor, knowing obviously what he did about the Chaos Gods, not a huge fan of psychic ability, but at the same time also kind of encouraged Magnus. Basically, the Emperor is just a really, really terrible father. Magnus the Red, is their Primarch. Big red dude, missing an eye. They hail from the planet of Prospero. Their law, now, if I'm not mistaken, they suffer from a kind of similar deal to the Emperor's Children in regards to having like a genetic mutational fault, which I believe they suppressed after many years. Although I've completely forgotten
the flesh change.
The flesh change, yeah, and I've forgotten how they managed to suppress it. I don't know whether it was through like
But
utilization.
this was through their exposure to the warp, wasn't
Yeah.
it? With the amount that they were sort of dabbling with, and again, this kind of comes back to the Emperor. It's like the Emperor kind of like gives Magnus like an AK-47.
Yeah.
And when Magnus says, well, what happens if I point this AK-47 at the side of my head and pull the trigger? He's like, no, don't worry about that. Just don't worry about that. Just maybe don't, but don't worry about it. That's kind of how I feel like he treats Psychers. It's like, here's this awesome ability. I'm going to tell you nothing about it.
And I think they have possibly one of the most tragic stories, I guess, in that Magnus, and by extent his legion, his sons, never really wanted to be traitor, never wanted to turn traitor. Magnus actually was, if I'm not mistaken, the first one to discover the kind of the heresy, the treachery, and try to warn the Emperor. Essentially, instead, just completely fucking everything in the process by what was the Emperor working on again? This project. It was the Webway project, right?
It was the Webway project,
Yeah.
and he needed to get back. He basically astrally projected himself through the warp to try and deliver a warning as fast as he could about Horus's turning to the Emperor. And in the process, because obviously the Emperor didn't tell anybody what he was working on, so they knew nothing about it. Standards operating procedure for EMPs.
Yeah.
But he ended up smashing through all of these wards to break into the Webway, and broke into the Imperial dungeon to deliver this message. And he kind of like smashed through this door and was like, "Dad, something bad's going to happen." And like then turned around to see like this mess that he'd caused, and
says no more.
Whoops.
Literally had the chance, like, you've already fucked it, you may as well say your piece and then go. But he's just like, oh, whoops, and then de-astral projects. But
of course, that was the last straw for the Emperor, because he'd already been warned. We already talked about Nicaea, where he was formally censured for his use of psychic powers after, what was the name of there was an issue. There was a city or a planet, wasn't there, that they basically destroyed and was destroyed in retaliate. Or am I getting my word bearers mixed
you're
up?
Getting your word bearers. You're thinking of your word bearers. But no,
ignore me.
They had been, and I think there was a lot of, actually, funnily enough, a lot of trickery and potential involvement of certain kind of possibly already heretical word bearers from the start. Looking at you, Erebus. A lot of people kind of trying to manipulate the council, which essentially was just like the Primarchs. Like you're basically being tried by your brothers, which isn't the who are all kind of insanely jealous of each other anyway. So it isn't the kind of the fairest shake. And they're basically told, like, the one thing that you do and you do really well, and you've basically built your entire civilization and culture around, you now legally can't do it anymore. And we're going to just trust you that you're not going to do it anymore. Well,
of course, it wasn't just him that was kind of screwed over by that. All librarians were removed at this point, but because of that opened the doors, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I think that like honestly did more harm than good, because then there was active rebellion in their choice to just carry on as normal, because then they can't really. They have to. That's their thing. That's what they do. Like I said, their entire kind of culture and stuff fell upon it. It's how they fought. They would use kind of offensive psychers, which wasn't really a thing that much back then. Psychers were mostly used for navigating the warp, or kind of other more niche, less combat-y roles, I guess.
But you said at the start though that they were reluctant. They didn't want to turn. That there was a tragic irony to what happened to them, which I agree to some extent. But at the same time, they thought that they knew better.
Oh yeah,
and that is it's that arrogance which ultimately sort of led them down that path
And
inevitably.
there's like a discussion, I guess, of like when Magnus arrives in the throne room and unintentionally destroys the Webway project. I think there's this realization of like, oh shit, I didn't know better. Actually, Daddy knows that Horus is going to betray him sooner rather than later. This is why the Webway project's being built, because the whole kind of premise of the Webway project is let's cut our alliance to the warp completely, because I've pissed off 4 chaos gods by stealing information away from them to create my Primarchs. So let's cut all like of humanity's need for the warp, because they need the warp to travel, into the interstellar gulf through the warp. So let's use the web of webway tunnels built by the almost extinct race of Eldar to safely traverse the warp without having to use navigators. They would just travel through them instead. And Magnus just completely destroyed that. I think that's although it frustrated me that he wasn't like, oh, it's happening now, like, crimes afoot. It was like, oh shit, yeah, I fucked up, and I thought I knew better, but actually he's the emperor for a reason. Even if he is a terrible father, he knows what's going down. He's practically a god up, and even before the events of the Siege of Terror. So yeah, pretty tragic story. They didn't want to turn by any means. I don't think they, apart from kind of what went down with Nike, they didn't really hold any massive resentment. One of kind of the most iconic conflicts of the heresy, where the Space Wolves are sent by the Emperor to bring the Thousand Sons in for censure, and then Horus kind of like twisted that on its head and actually told the Space Wolves, who thought that Horus was kind of chill and not a traitor, and Horus twisted that to you Space Wolves are going there to kill him and his legion, because at the time Horus didn't think that he had him on side, had Magnus on side. So removing an entire legion from the chessboard of this war was kind of the move.
And that was Russ's MO as well. I mean,
he was the
there's instances in the past. That was his role. He was in open defiance of the Emperor's edict. Things had happened to other legions before in the past, which we don't know entirely, but it's hinted at that the Wolves were maybe involved in at least one. And it's a really when you think of how things turn up. When they arrive at Prospero, it's the Space Wolves alongside the Custodians and the Silent Sisters. Obviously, Silent Sisters there for their anti
psyker
telepath and anti-psyker abilities. But then you've got on the side of the Loyalists, you've got engines of the Legio Mortis fighting alongside the Space Wolves against Legio Zestobiax, which is the one which was on Prospero. Again, another legion which I wish we'd have got rules for in AT. I think they would have made really interesting ones. But again, that Titan Legion wasn't really traitor. It got branded a traitorous legion, but it never really was. No. Like you say, he twists that whole narrative round from being a bring him to heel to a
kill him.
This cataclysmic extermination attempt on the Thousand Sons.
And also the Thousand Sons. They were not going to win the war, and without going into too much detail, again, another first captain that shakes up the course of history ahead of its Primarch, Ahriman. I've forgotten the name of the curse that now afflicts them, but basically they are now once again threatened with the shape change,
the flesh
change, because of the magics that they've unleashed on Prospero. And so he basically goes, right, well, let's just not need flesh then, and turns the Legion into mummies of dust, essentially, that are trapped inside their armor, which basically turn them into kind of mindless servitors. And that was also against the will of Magnus as well. So yeah, again, just just so many you know, such a tragic story that really could have gone either way in terms of loyalty for the Legion, and you know they'll be
And how it might have changed the narrative if they had stayed loyalist, or he'd been a bit more cautious.
and also even there are like loyalist legions that we could say the same about as well. So it's not like a a unique thing, but it is just one of those where you've got to understand that actually they're not, although they are quite prominent in 40k as a heretic legion, they are one of the kind of the four that gets their own rules. They were really kind of on the fence for quite a while on to whose side they would be on.
Well, ultimately, it comes down to the fate of Magnus when doesn't he get like full on like Bane Batman, like at the steps of one of the great pyramids? He gets like his back broken across Russ's knee or something, doesn't he? And like he's on death's door and he's effectively teleported away from the planet, and they reconvene on the planet of the sorcerers, I think it is, in the Eye of Terror, and that's where things kind of start going a little bit wrong for Magnus. He gets his soul shattered into like all of these different shards, like the Satan, really.
Yeah.
And he tries to recover. They're trying to recover these shards of Magnus to restore their Primarch to kind of what he was, but they don't restore enough of him. So all of the things which made him good are kind of lost, and the only stuff that remains is his more negative traits.
But yeah, theirs was a rapid kind of fall. Once they started falling, it was just like boom, traitors. No kind of gradual shift like the other legions. It gets.
I really enjoyed the exchange with Araman and Kirill Sinderman in the End and the Death books, when he basically just rocks up and he turns up in this library right in the middle of the Imperial Palace. It's like, hello, boys. And he's like this corrupted, gross looking thing now. But he's still like, he's not overtly, I mean, he has a menace to him, but he's not like, he doesn't stop them from doing anything. He has like these reasonably civil kind of conversations with these loyalists.
He's a bit of a book nerd. He just kind of wants pilf, because it's quite a rare library, wasn't it? It was like a personal collection, or something quite similar. So yeah, that was quite funny to see them even at the end of the kind of heresy, where most other traitor legions are peaked at their corruption. Araman's just like, I can kill you guys if you want, because it's probably going to be so much better than what's about to break through those doors. But like, I'm not here to kill you. I just want to read. And then they kind of all have like a book reading session together, which is, it's kind of funny,
like a circle group.
Yeah.
But they don't really take an active part in the Siege of Terror. No. Really, they do that ritual, don't they? They do a ritual.
Their impact
which
big,
helps.
But
is that in Solar War, where they basically sneak onto that secret Blackstone facility in space? And they set off a ritual, which basically, that I think isn't that what kind of encompasses the solar region in that kind of shroud?
Yeah, like opens that like maybe not warp rift, but warp rift thing, right?
Yeah, but they're ultimately entirely in it for themselves. By the end, they don't really care what happens to Horus and those guys. Like, they don't actively take a huge amount of a role in the ground war of the Siege of Terror. They're purely in it for their own means by that point.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, prime candidates for Zinch, the god of change. Very much just up to kind of trickery and sorcery. Very very very. I don't want to say complex legion, because I don't feel like they have the same
multi-layered.
I don't think they have the same amount of depth as some of the other legions, but they definitely have their own kind of tragic tale to tell.
So on that note, where are we putting?
It's a hard one, I mean, this is the I have a general indifference to them as it is, so I don't want too much of my kind of personal
Shall I tell you where I
want to hear your... I think I need your call on this one, because I don't... I'm going to say. Ooh.
I personally would put them in A. I think that as far as an interesting legion with a lot of depth to them, I think that they're one of the more fascinating legions. I'm a sucker for a tragic irony in a Greek play.
Okay.
And to me, that's what kind of sings to me about these guys. And, you know, who they were, what they sort of lastly turned into, how they got there. Obviously, the battle between Vulcan and Magnus at the end.
That was pretty cool. Yeah.
You know, there's... Yeah, I mean, I would put them... Personally, I would put them up there as one of my favourite sort of arcs in the Horus Heresy.
So,
but having seen me put that there, where would you put yours?
yeah, so that's the thing, right? I'm looking at this and I'm like, right, if I had 4 books laid out in front of me, you know, an Emperor's Children heresy novel that I've not read, a Night Lord's heresy novel that I've not read, a Death Guard heresy novel I've not read, and a Thousand Suns one, I don't think Thousand Suns would be anywhere near the top of what I'd choose to read. Because I don't know whether that's just down to personal taste or whether I don't think I think their lore is a tragedy, but it can be very frustrating. Kind of like the Iron Warriors. I would say B. I don't think they're quite...
Just to sit on the fence some more.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't want to load up B too much. But I have to ask myself, like, would I really choose reading, you know, or would you really choose reading a Thousand Suns novel over a fresh Night Lords or a fresh Emperor's Children one you haven't read?
I know what I would.
You know you would.
I know I would, but then I don't like Night Lords.
Okay, fair.
To me, all of these ones here are more kind of two-dimensional, whereas I've always thought that they had a bit more to them. But don't let me swing your opinion. I mean, perhaps by moving these down to B, do we need to look at some of the earlier ones that we looked at?
Yeah, maybe, you know.
Or are you happy with that?
Ooh, okay, right. Move it up to A, but we're gonna have a little reshuffle at the end. I think we're gonna have a little, just a couple need to be swapped. I think
just a little
I think we need to adjust the curve.
Let's see if I get my own way with this one.
We'll duke it out.
Let's talk about their Legions Imperialis rules. So again, this is a very, very short rule. Kind shields. Thousand Suns models with the Commander special rule gain the Shield Generator 6+ special rule. What the absolute fuck have they done to my boys? It's dog shit.
So
it's like...
Do we even need to talk about this one?
So there's the Shield Generator special rule basically means that models within 6 inches of it gain a 6+ invulnerable save. Whoop-de fucking do, really. Like, the way that invulnerable saves work is that you only get one of them anyway, and like if there's no AP, you're going to be taking their regular 5+ armor save. If they're in cover, they're getting generally a 5+ cover save. Like even the, you know, there are similar. It's one model per formation, and everything within 4 inches of it gets a 6+ invulnerable save, which is going to save 1 in 6 of those models.
I think that's the thing as well, right? It's not really that impactful anyway because of it just being an invuln save, but then also it's a 6+.
If it was a 5+, maybe, but even then, like,
I don't think that would shift its position at all.
It should be, if they're going to go as kind shields as the ability behind it, then every formation gets a 6+ invulnerable save. That would basically be the same or very similar to the White Scars improve your Jinx save by +1. Yeah, and that I think is better, because in that situation with the White Scars, you lean into that.
Yeah.
You take Outrider squadrons, right, and now all of a sudden you've got a 5-up invulnerable. Well, 5-up is the same as your armor save. So for the most part, you're basically getting a 5-up invulnerable save. That's not bad. This is dog shit.
Yeah.
And like I say, how much I love the lore behind them. It's awful. I'm really disappointed with this. And they've got such a beautiful color scheme again. Like, you're basically not taking any Legion rules to run these guys, really. Like, nothing of any value. There is no reason you would choose this. Like, if you were looking from a purely metagamey point of view, you wouldn't touch these with a barge pole. There is probably 16 other legions with better rules than these. I think the only other contender is possibly Night Lords, and I think this is possibly the worst in the game.
Yeah, I feel like even Night Lords is better than that one, to be honest. Yeah, it's a bit lame, isn't it?
Super disappointing.
Like how can we incorporate psychic powers into legions?
But it's
just that.
It's stuff like this which makes me hope that they will release some kind of additional special rules down the line for the legions, or special units, or something like that, or something to kind of add a little bit of balance into these ones which have basically been screwed over by really poor
We don't
rules.
even need models. Like, just give us the special rules for the units and let us
the
paint
formation,
them different colors.
Yeah, here is a formation which is predominantly Terminators. This is your This is your Destarin.
This is your.
They get this special rule.
Here's the Third Company Elite with your cacophony units for your Emperor's Children. You just have a slightly different take, slightly different color scheme. It's we need an injection of some more personality rules wise.
Who knows? In a year's time, when somebody is inevitably finding this video on YouTube, maybe that will have been released.
It's Primarchs now, you idiots!
But right now, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, imagine how good. Well, actually, no, I can't imagine how good Magnus would be. He'd probably be wank.
Yeah.
If this has got anything to do with it.
I would love to see. I know this is slightly off topic. I would love to see Primarchs at this scale. Just like how much destruction you could let them unleash by themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It would be fun. Right.
Yeah, Damp Squib.
Talking of Primarchs.
Oh dear.
The Primarch of Primarchs, the War Master himself, the 16th Legion, Sons of Horus, formerly known as the Lunar Wolves.
These are your star bloody players, right? These are your, these are the kind of the best of the best. They are the all-rounders that just do everything real damn good. And by extension, Horus, is named the Emperor's favorite son, essentially, or most trusted son. The irony there, and is made to be the War Master of the Great Crusade, while the Emperor goes home to Terra and, unbeknownst to them, starts work on the Webway project. So this is the Legion that is just the best of the best, and they know it as well. They are very aware of their high standing, and they hold themselves to it,
and rightfully so.
And rightfully so, definitely. They're quite a hard one to summarize, because they are the arch-traitors, right? They are the bad guys that kind of set this whole, the word bearers may have been working from the shadows for a lot longer, but these were the poster boys of the heresy. And I think that's kind of what makes it so tragic and so poignant is that they are or are the best of the best, and they got turned and led the
Yeah, and the pinnacle brought low.
right, the most trusted being the betrayer, so they're very much a fan of rapid like insertion tactics, not to the level of like White Scars with lots of bikes and gotta go fast attitude, but more just like assault based doctrines where they get in, they do their job, and they get out, and they don't specialize in dueling or siegecraft or defense. They are everything. They kind of like they take bits from other legions and just make it their own and like do it really well, potentially as well as these other legions. So yeah, they are just the best of the best, and uh, the leaders of essentially the heresy, this rebellion against the emperor. They are very much, they very much suffer from main character syndrome, both from the loyalist and traitor side. Um, there is a very heavily developed written lore about them just due to the fact that they're kind of at the pinnacle of this whole event, right?
And they need to have it. All needs to be justified, doesn't it? For the narrative to make sense, you need to understand the motives behind
Yeah.
what's brought you to that point, and that's why so much time is invested.
And I will say, I enjoy their Fall to Chaos. I don't think it's my favorite. I find it annoying that it's just like, oh, that's Erebus, or just like the kind of like, there's no like, although they're kind of on the road to it in certain degrees, there's no internal change. Everything seems to be just at the whim of the word bearers and their plans that they've put in. There is no like flaw, aside from kind of unrivaled. I want to say pride, but just hubris.
Or like overconfidence.
What's the word for it? Like the want to. No, his like drive to conquer, right? Not necessarily his like thoughts about how great he is, but his just like Horus's unrelenting just need to just carry on and be the best at everything he does, right? So, although the signs are there, like I don't think there would have been any real fool without the shenanigans of another legion, and I think that kind of it kind of dampens it a little, I guess. Like although every traitor legion obviously had wordbearer influences mostly through the lodges, right? The secret lodges. It didn't feel. It was good to see how the Legion reacted to those lodges, where like there was definitely a lot more of a divide within the Sons of Horus between loyalist and traitor ideologies. But because Horus is so magnetic and charismatic as a character, it was very easy for him to sway those that would otherwise probably question why why they were doing what they were doing. And so that again, this is one of the ones that the lore I think starts off really well, really solid. Obviously, like I said, they're the main character throughout much of the heresy anyway, as a legion. So at first it starts off really good. There's a level of frustration, I guess I feel, towards the end of the series and into the Siege of Terror, where you're just like, oh, this is just a bit pathetic now, Horus, isn't it? Like you're mewling about your father just a little bit too much. It's just a little bit too. It kind of made me when I was like listening to the books, I was just kind of a bit like, oh, you're kind of just sounding a bit lame now, guys. Like at least the other, like a lot of the Sons of Horus haven't really thrown themselves into full kind of corrupted, demonness like a lot of the other legions had. There was still quite a divide there as well. And then Horus is kind of just a bit sad and pathetic once he kind of fully loses himself.
I'll tell you what I think the problem is, and I think it's a problem of the way that the Siege of Terror happens. Is that Horus does a lot of sitting. I know he's obviously communing with, the greater powers and absorbing all
And
this
his father
stuff,
at the same time, FaceTiming him through the
FaceTiming him through the warp. But it kind of feels like it's sort of like, right, okay, Fulgrim, off you go. You run against that wall. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, Perturabo, you run against that wall. Okay, right, and that didn't work. Angron, off you go. You go against that wall. Rather than everybody just basically throwing in. I know it's kind of implied. Obviously, everyone is in it together, right? But like, if he's this all-powerful being, right, it should have been over and done. Like, and him sitting out of it, it does feel like it's because if they threw him into it, it would just, if they unleashed his capabilities, as becomes apparent in the Jewels of Sanguinius and the Emperor, too soon, it wouldn't make for an interesting story. But saying that, I think that the Sons of Horus, for a start, there is a lot which is written about the Sons of Horus by Dan Abnett, and that is, never a bad read. And he has these things, I forget what he calls them. There's something like conduit points in the narrative where these things kind of, all these threads which have been going on for, multiple books kind of come together. So like Molech is the first one with in Vengeful Spirits, bringing all of those threads together, bringing those characters back in, him becoming Horus Engorged, whatever you want to call him.
Hungry Horus.
He means to have you. Then there's Saturnine as well. There's another one, again, where those threads are kind of brought back in together again, in comes back in Loken, in comes back in Axamand and all of those guys, and you have that kind of whole thing around the defense of the Saturnine Gate. And it is, as tableaus, I think that they are awesome, and there is no denying that the story of the heresy is the story of the Sons of Horus. I mean, you could argue that, the word bearers instigated it and all of that kind of stuff, but ultimately it is, everyone else is just a supporting character. Certainly on the Traitor's side, everyone else is a supporting character to Horus. And
nobody would have followed the word bearers into heresy, and they knew that. No. Everyone thought that Lorgar was weak. He was the worst fighter. He was more devoted. We'll get to kind of that when we talk about the word bearers in a sec. You needed Horus to lead it, or it just wouldn't have happened. You needed like kind of this immense mental fortress or power to kind of pull all of these forces together, all of these squabbling brothers, as like a semi-father figure almost, which is there's a lot of like poetry in this story, with Horus essentially becoming a pseudo kind of father figure to his arguing and squabbling siblings, while he's trying to kind of murder his own, their kind of shared father, and and to replace him. So yeah, and like I don't want, I guess, my comments about him, being kind of lame at the end to it doesn't at all kind of adjust my score for them. I think that there's so much written, like really good quality written stuff about them, just in those first 3 books alone. Their secret, very kind of almost astrology based culture. They are very kind of like spiritual, which is quite funny and quite at odds of like their warlike ability. Everything has like a ritualistic purpose to it, whether they see it as that or not. Their moonlight secret gatherings to enter, a new person to the Mournival, like everything has these like these little meanings. They're quite a very kind of deep legion, and they are, there are no better poster boys for the heresy than these on the traitor side, at least. So yeah, and obviously, like we discussed earlier, they have the old first captain at it again, essentially one of the big bads in the 40k universe now. Abaddon is. So
again, though, like that's another character in the 40k universe that they gave a character to. Very much feels like resentful of the fact demons are involved. This was supposed to be an Astartes war. This was supposed to be how they would have done it when they took over, the compliances during the Great Crusade. That's how they should have won it. And his end point in the books as well, I think I liked how they ended the narrative of I didn't see it coming, and this isn't a spoiler that we will include, but I thought it was handled really well and really interestingly how they handled that situation. And that Mournival quartet was just an interesting balance of characters as well between the four of them. What is so Loken, Axamand, Abaddon, and Torgaddon. And later he becomes Tormageddon, doesn't he? I think it is.
Yeah.
After because he gets killed, doesn't he? He's one of the ones who gets killed on this one. But it's just lots of little onion layers of different bits you can dive into.
And
so that being said, Johnny, where are you? Where are you thinking?
I mean, I feel like it would be a disservice if these weren't an A. I don't think. Oh, man, if the thing is, right, if they're not S tier, who's gonna be?
Blood Angels.
Fuck off. I guess so. We do have the Loyalist Legions. I do want to say S tier because I think
I'm sensing a but.
Yeah, and I can't rationalize that but. I can't rationalize the but. Yeah, screw it. S tier. I think their lore, explored through a point of view character that is multiple point of view characters that are either directly affiliated within the Legion, aka Loken, where you're seeing you're peering behind the veil of these from kind of a glance are just soldiers, essentially super soldiers that are just training and fighting and being all macho, and you're actually looking at some a bit more careful and softer kind of ritualistic behaviors that you wouldn't expect a being such as that to kind of entertain, and then seeing them from the eyes of mortals, Euphrates Keeler and co. Because I'm not going to remember all their names perfectly, but seeing them from that side as well. And although their fall wasn't manufactured by themselves, actually watching it from those POVs, just it's although they are a jack of all trades legion, they still very much have their own identity just through being good, but like done in the right way, like presented in the right way that doesn't make them the Mary Sue that Ultramarines are often, I'd say, unfairly shown as or talked about as. So I think S or A plus would be my go for them.
I don't think that there's any Legion out there which is had so much time and effort in the Heresy dedicated to it, to expand it beyond, the basic level. I can't argue with an S. I think I would have put it as either an S or an A, purely from that point of view. It's one of the few legions that you consistently see both sides of it, the loyalist and the traitor side of it. And even Horus has glimmers where he flits between the two personalities throughout, until you see the monster that ultimately he becomes by the end of the book, how irredeemable he really is. No, I think that's if they're not S, I don't really know who else would be in that. Moving on to their rules in Legions Imperialis, so they have Death Dealers. So when a Sons of Horus model issued with an advanced order is firing at a target within 6 inches of it, it may re-roll hit rolls of 1 when firing a weapon with a light or light AT trait while the order is in effect. I think that this is okay. Obviously, it's any model within it, which a lot of them kind of get sort of restricted to, infantry or walkers or, what have you. Whereas this is like any model within it. So that means that, getting a reroll is good. Advanced orders is going to be used a lot. It's also an order that you can always take even if your formation is broken. So it's going to be used throughout the game. The 6-inch range, I think, is possibly the restricting factor here. But then what this does do is mean that your point defense against charges is exceptional, because if you're overwatching or if you are, just firing any weapon at a close target, re-rolling that 1 is another opportunity to roll another 5 or a 6. I think that where this rule really excels is in things like fast attack squadrons, like the jet bikes, with point defense, as I said, with units which are going to be contesting objectives. So, where the units that you're going to push up, try and take those central objectives, deploy out, and then if anybody comes to try and take that objective off you, you can overwatch fire, spend your token, and you're going to get that reroll 1. I don't think that the ability is as good as, say, the Imperial Fist's accurate trait. But that is more restrictive on, the units which can take it, because it can only be certain units, and only on a first fire order. So you're sacrificing mobility, which these guys don't. But that has the ability to reroll everything that misses, rather than just a 1, which is obviously a lot more dice. And so, I think that this is a pretty solid rule set. It will get used pretty much every game. It doesn't restrict you into a certain way of playing. You can't really build a force around it, but I suppose you can to an extent. Like I say, I would be thinking about point defense weapons here.
It helps enforce
Short
loadouts,
range.
right? If you're trying to decide between 2 loadouts, you're going to go for, stuff that's going to synergize well with the Sons of Horus trait.
Yeah, light or light AT is really, you're talking bolters, plasma guns, autocannons, that kind of thing. So you're definitely talking the lighter weapons, which is why the point defense. That's why I'm leaning towards those kind of point defense things, and things like the fast attack squadrons, which have like heavy bolters as their predominant weapon. So I think it's going to be good against it's a good rule against infantry heavy forces, or non-vehicular forces, I guess. It's not quite so good against mechanized forces. So if you come across a lot of mechanized armies or tank companies for the Solar Auxiliary, it's probably not as good. With regards to ranking, I think it's a B. I think that it's a good choice. There's nothing negative about it. I think you get a lot of use out of it. I don't think it's as good as the World Eater's special ability or the Iron Warriors. But I think as a core, I think it's a solid. It gives you a solid core, which gives you a lot of options to work around. So I think I'm going to stick that in a B.
Solid, dependable, just like the Sons of Horus.
Happy with
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Just like the solid.
Just like the
just like the
solid.
solid. Just like the Sons of Horus. Yeah, dependable, agile, gets the job done. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so let's talk about Erebus and his monkeys, and I suppose we should also talk about Lorgar as well.
Also
but
exists somewhere in the Word Bearers.
yeah,
Tied for my favorite Legion. Word Bearers are awesome. They are the architects of the heresy. They laid the groundwork, generations in the making, to bring about this this heresy. So Word Bearers, they're led by the Primarch Lorgar Aurelian, who was born on the planet of Colchis, or sorry, sent to the planet of Colchis, which was a very, very heavily religious world. As the Emperor discovered him, as one might who would kind of openly believe in religion, that the Emperor himself is a god figure, and the Emperor has glamours, right? He like some sort of fey being. He chooses how he presents to those that witness him, because he's too magnificent to behold. So obviously, Lorgar practically saw a god. The thing about the Emperor is that, possibly due to the fact that he's pissed off some actual gods, that he's very anti theologian. He does not like religion, and he says that he does not like people comparing him to a god or worshipping him as one. So what do the Word Bearers do? They worship him as a god, and they build a city called Monarchia, which is a like a paradise city, right? This thing is beautiful. They're along with religion, they're very heavy on like arts and culture, poetry and bookwork. So the city was wondrous, was beautiful. The gem, like the very thing that the Word Bearers were proud about. And I guess for some reason, so the Emperor found out about them essentially building this city to worship him, and the Emperor's like, I'm sick of telling this idiot to stop worshipping me like a god. I'm going to send the Ultramarines to humiliate them and burn their jewel, their favorite city, to the ground. So the Ultramarines turn up and um, force every single living person within Monarchia to leave Monarchia, and then they raise the thing from orbit, right? To top it all off, after destroying one of the things that meant the most to Lorgar, the Emperor forced Lorgar and his legion of Word Bearers to kneel to Rebute Guilliman, his brother, and the Ultramarines. And I think that specific moment there was almost the flick of the switch. Now, because they were avid readers and researchers of divinity, trying to find the divine in the mundane universe, certain devout members of the Word Bearers, such as Erebus, had found other texts that mention other gods, and lo and behold, basically they start accidentally and then purposefully worshipping the Chaos gods. So they orchestrate this entire. They're basically very, very upset about this quite rightly so, to be honest, about this kind of humiliation in front of what's viewed as the very the perfect legion, not necessarily like perfection like the Emperor's Children, but the Ultramarines are kind of the symbol of what the Ultramarines should be, what the Space Marines should be. These kind of defenders of humanity that are stalwart and very.
And certainly what he had envisioned for the Space Marines after the Great Crusaders
The Ultramarines
finished.
were basically an experiment to see, like, what happens if we just give Space Marines a set of gloves and gardening shears and tell them to not fight. Just doubly humiliating for the word bearers. And they go down this trail and they start influencing a lot of the other legions through these lodges that they set up, where they're basically just like encouraging secret meetings where Marines can talk to each other irrespective of rank, quite openly. It's meant to be like a kind of a morale thing for the legions. And it was accepted into a lot of the legions as well, not just the traitor ones.
It's kind of like Space Marine Fight Club, isn't
it? Yeah, right. It's like a secret society. It's like a Freemason, Marine group almost, right? And they spread their heresies through that, and then through that into the actual legions themselves. Now, Lorgar is probably, I think, the weakest part of the word bearers. I think they are a very, very cool legion. They were wronged. I think they were probably one of the most openly wronged legions by the Emperor. I think it's no question whether they return or not, because of the kind of, although they used to worship him, the kind of embarrassment of that is just kind of there's not something that you can just forget about or repair. So Lorgar is a bit not a very good fighter at all, really, compared to the other Primarchs. Obviously still a Primarch, so still will kick ass, but compared to the other Primarchs, he is definitely bottom of the pecking order. But his sons were more than happy to pick up the demonic gifts. They are essentially the 40k Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines in Heresy. They are the first to get their versions of Possessed, the Gal Vorbak. And there's very, very cool origin story about how Sol Tarvitz, who is the leader of the Serrated Sun chapter, where a lot of the Gal Vorbak are in, how he comes to gain these powers through basically being stranded in the warp, right? So, no, lots of really, really solid lore about how this corruption has begun to spread. Now, unfortunately, when you talk about the word bearers, you also have to talk about Erebus. And all my homies hate Erebus, like we don't
fuck that guy directly.
Yeah, we don't fuck with Erebus. Not even word bearer players like Erebus. So Erebus is this like it's almost comedic.
He's like the puppeteer.
He's like a reoccurring fucking Scooby-Doo villain. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen at the end of this book. Oh, we take off the mask. It was Erebus. No way. Oh man. Erebus is low key a Primarch of this legion alone. I feel like he had more effect over the entire legion than their actual Primarch ever did. This dude is,
and he's a chaplain as well, which wasn't really a common rank amongst the Space Marines at this particular point. I believe in time.
Back in the Heresy,
hailing back to the theology.
Yeah. So I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in 30k, the chaplains were actually word bearers that were sent to other legions, so that the word bearers could learn a little bit about them, and also try and mediate and all of that sort of stuff. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how at least the whole chaplain thing started. So yeah, this dude's just a chaplain, and is basically like one of the most hated characters in that entire book series, because he is responsible for killing off a lot of favorite characters throughout the entire of the series, and he's generally just like a douchebag, and I think it's
He's the guy who kind of orchestrates everything,
Yeah.
though, isn't it? Isn't it him who gives Fulgrim the is it him who gives him the lair blade?
Yeah, he causes a like he basically causes like so much bad shit to happen just to cause these effects to come into place. So yeah, he gets the layer blade for Fulgrim. From that, no, was it the layer blade?
He's involved in the Davanites, isn't he? With the
The
Athame.
Athame, that's it. He steals a weapon from some advanced thing, but it's the Athame that kills Horus.
Yeah.
For Horus to then be resurrected using the power of the warp. So yeah, and it's unlike other villains of this nature. Although Erebus is so hated and is a love to hate character, it kind of does tarnish the Legion a little bit because he is just so annoying throughout those books. To the point where it gets a little bit frustrating at some points. Like I feel like a single Marine should not have as much influence on this entire thing that Erebus does have. I know there's lore reasons why he's like accumulated this power.
How can he be in all of these places?
Yeah.
Like he manages to kind of just show up
And
at every.
If he has the powers that
place
he
in the
has,
universe.
he can do, and like he has been like traveling between like dimensions and between times to like just try and create this perfect storm, I guess. But like it's almost like a faux pas. Sometimes it feels like for these books where it's like, how do we explain why this needed to happen? Oh, Erebus set it up, of course. You know, there's no other person that would have the capability to see like all these different timelines that the reader is seeing and put those pieces together. I guess Erebus is very much has a very similar eye view to the heresy as the reader. You know, is very aware of what is going on.
Yeah,
and is actively.
It's because he has that view behind the curtain.
Exactly.
That so many other people don't. I think one of the interesting things about word bearers is how much they impact the future. Not like obviously they're trying to bring around their perfect society with chaos, but actually what they do is that they are actually responsible ultimately for how the Imperium becomes, like with the Laetitia Divinitas being, you know, the Book of Lorgar originally. So like the holy book of future mankind, future Imperium, is ultimately a chaos text written by a traitor when he was, you know, treating him as a god. You know, and how that sort of circulates around people like Euphrates. Is it Euphrates Keeler or is it what's the other one?
It's
Not
Euphrates Keeler is the spiritual one, right? One of the remembrances.
Which one am I thinking of? That yeah. I think it is Euphrates Keeler. I get her and the ones who's the close advisor to Horus, who
the one that was friends with Loken
is killed. Yeah.
Oh man, it feels like age. We need to reread those books again because that is
Mercedes Ollerton.
That's it.
Yeah. But obviously starts Euphrates Keeler down that route, sort of latterly as well. And the effect that has against the traitors in the Siege of Terror.
Which kind of, I mean, I don't think this is much of a wild theory. Like I feel like a lot of people have come to this conclusion, which is that the Siege of Terror kind of pretty much ended how Chaos wanted it to, right? Or at least, you know, the long game that it's created for the Chaos Gods to just subsist on the suffering of humanity, who are the most, you know, potent when it comes to like their souls and their devotion to Chaos. But yeah, I don't know. It's
Well, I mean, we'll come to a bit of lore that what the name of the Farseer, Eldrad Ulthuan,
yes,
has, you know, and the rationale for another legion as to why humanity needed to be destroyed by Horus ultimately was important. Like you say, I think that I think you're right when you say that is the ultimately the win. It doesn't feel like a win at the time, but
I don't think
in the long term,
I think that, you know, obviously trying to avoid spoilers, the reaction of the Chaos Gods to the ending is not what I expected. I was expecting them to go, yes, exactly as planned, but they do seem at least slightly surprised by the ending of this. But really, it's a long term win for them as a whole.
So where do they fall then?
I think especially I think their lore is cool. I think although their Legion has a lot of flawed characters and annoying characters, it's still enjoyable to read what the hell they're up to.
There's some really great books that they've got. I think, but Betrayer, I think is the one that jumps to mind by Aaron Dembski Bowden.
The duo of
that's also got some cool.
Khan and Soltarvitz is awesome.
And it's got of course, lots of Audax in that as well, which is always fun. First Heretic. Am I thinking of Betrayer? Is it Betrayer? First Heretic, obviously, is the one which deals with Monarchia, isn't it?
Betrayer is a lot of word bearers and.
And let's not forget Calth.
Oh god,
of course.
The Betrayal at Calth is
Furious Abyss and Betrayal at Calth. Some really awesome thing. They set up the entire Ruin Storm, which basically sets the stage really for that early heresy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the first strike of the clock, so to speak, in the heresy. I think definitely for the Betrayal at Calth alone, that is such a awesomely orchestrated, and it like highlights the one good thing that Lorgar is, which is a creative, artsy person that is basically orchestrating this music, and the music is just the power of the warp and like fate and reality, and like how I forget who wrote it, but how it's written about, and how these strings are pulled. And the way they describe how these strings are pulled, I think it's so cool.
But obviously, towards the end, he's almost banished from Horus's side, isn't he? Lorgar, he gets cast aside.
He gets too big for his own boots. He gets smited aside by Horus. Zardu Lyak, who has, I think, potentially the coolest trio of models in the entire Heresy catalog range, although the Galvorback are right behind that. Zardu Lyak takes control of the Wordbearer forces on the Siege of Terror, and there's a very cool scene where he's basically just being a cult demagogue and trying to subvert the will of the defenders to make them
Is he the guy who basically comes down and does the whole Rick and Morty show me what you got?
He raises himself up on this platform and like projects his voice psychically to everyone there.
I always kind of imagine that as him as like projecting a giant head of himself.
And he's always pissing off Abaddon, and Abaddon's getting like constantly really wound up about him, and it's very, very funny. But yeah, his model as well with those two Anakatulis blade slaves, which are basically two Marines that are just slaved to demon blades, and like they're normal guys until they pull the blades out, and then they become these like hulking possessed dudes. Insanely sick, and the models are awesome. But this isn't a model, this is a lore chat, and I still think they strongly deserve that A.
Okay. Well, I mean, if we're giving 1,000 Suns an A, I'm happy with giving
honestly, this is my 1,000 Suns.
Yeah. So rules-wise, they have the ability called True Believers in Legions Imperialis, which is detachments within a word-bearer's formation never count as broken for the purposes of being issued an order. They can be issued any order they normally could instead of just the advance order or march order. In addition, all word-bearers' detachments ignore the effects of the Dread Order special rule. Now, broken formations is something that inevitably is probably going to happen. You're going to take losses. You're probably going to take losses in the first couple of turns, which, but by turn 2, it's often the case that you've probably got at least one broken formation. So being able to effectively ignore the penalties for orders on that is quite a big thing. It allows you to still maintain a lot of tactical flexibility. You're still obviously not, you're still getting the negatives for like the morale issues, but I think that in itself is pretty good. You can still charge. You can Oh, is that the only one that's missing? Charge, advance.
First
Oh,
fire,
first
yeah.
fire. You know, you basically got everything open to you then. The second part of it, the ignores the dread aura effect special rule, that doesn't really come into play very often at the moment. I think there's only one model with the dread aura effect, and that is the Psi Titan.
You know why that's
So
there,
that
though.
won't play. Yeah, I think that this has to be here purely because in the future we'll get demons, and there'll be some sort of dread aura effect as a result of demons. So I think that these are likely going to get better. But even saying that, the ability to kind of just ignore the broken effects from the terms of order, I think is a solid core ability for a legion, and because of that, again, I'm not sure it's an A, but I think it's probably at least as good as the Sons of Horus ability, and I would probably put that in as a
I don't
as a
think it's an
B
A.
at that
I think a
particular
B is
point there.
a good one there. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, demons!
Yeah.
Come on, give me those
Yeah,
epic scale
it's going to
demons,
happen soon, isn't it? It's got to
please.
happen. Right, come on. We have been going for nearly 3
Right,
hours.
this is
It's been
a
a long
long
one. We've got
episode.
one left. Yeah, well, it was the 2K
It was the 2K
special, wasn't
special.
it? You know, it's hopefully people will find the time to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, last but not least, are they loyalists? Are they traitors? We put them in the traitors for now. This is the 20th Legion, the Alpha Legion.
So yes, Alpha Legion, the sneaky boys of the setting, in terms of subterfuge.
Slaughtered.
Yeah, their Primarchs are Gollum and Smeagol. No, so the Primarch or Primarchs are Alfarius and maybe Amagon. But yes, Amagon as well. Twins by birth. They are visually almost or practically identical to each other. And that's the deal with the entire Legion. You don't know an individual Marine's name. You will hear the famous quote, which is, "I am Alfarius." They are incredibly secretive. You don't. No one really knows what their goals are, including their own Legion. They are constantly just playing, kind of these Machiavellian plots within themselves, let alone against other legions. Um, uh, Alvarius has this cool little party trick where he pretends to be, because he's shorter than the other Primarchs, because usually Primarchs like tower over their Astartes sons, but because he's shorter than other Primarchs, he can um, a lot easier for him to pretend to be just like a normal battle brother. So he'll call a Primarch to come visit him, and he'll dress up a standard Marine as like him, and then he'll just be stood in the corner as like an honor guard or something, right? But obviously, because all of his siblings are superhumans, they'll notice it anyway. But yeah, very very cool Legion, as you mentioned. A lot of interaction with Eldrad Ulfwan and the Eldar race, who at the time, and this is unknown even to the readers, they are foreseeing the birth of another Chaos God. Well, they're very concerned about the birth of another Chaos God after their kind of antics gave birth to Slaanesh, and so are very, very keen for humanity to burn themselves out in this war, in this heresy. And so their main conduit for that is the Alpha Legion. So the Alpha Legion, although they are declared traitor, because I guess, if you fight a loyalist, even for a just cause, you are a traitor. So they're known as traitors. They have been scratched from the records in 40k history, but actually more often than not would be fighting both sides. They will hide sleeper agents everywhere. They'll put them into the ranks of other legions, and these agents will pretend to be from these other legions, and they'll like put them in like cryopods or something in like key locations, like somewhere that they shouldn't be allowed access. And they'll just have like an Alpha Legion and they're just like having a little nap in like some highly secured area, waiting for the call signal to activate.
Well, of course, the pinnacle of that being that Alfarius foresaw an event that he might have to take over or attack Terra. So, he even had people in like cryo sleep stashed away in areas of Earth, and different contingencies that people wouldn't. There's Alpha Legion who are woken up and they've got no idea what the state of the galaxy is in, but by being given a code word, that's all they need to tell them, okay, we're fighting the Emperor now.
We're protecting the Emperor. They don't know what they're going to wake up to. These like sleeper agents. They are. I think through the issue is, I guess, lore wise, you can't write about them too much, because then the whole like allure of them being like,
they need to be enigmatic.
But
yeah, and you can't talk too much to their motivations as well, because like you say at the start of it, it's very much like you need to join Horus because you are ultimately saving humanity from a worse fate. Basically they predict the Imperium, and that's what he's shown, like this despotic empire. And so that's what sways him. So although he sides with the traitors in his heart, like he's loyal to humanity, not necessarily the Imperium. But then as it kind of goes on a little bit further on down, that kind of subtlety starts to get eroded a little bit, and they do become a bit more just out and out, definitely in it for themselves, and especially Alfarius, at least.
So I think Alfarius is essentially known as the traitor head of the Hydra, right? And Amegon is the loyalist head of the Hydra. But they like we were just saying, you can't really write too much about them, but there still has to be a little bit, otherwise there's nothing to write about. The stuff the stuff that you kind of naturally read throughout the Horus Heresy books. I think a lot of their interest comes from not the actual legion or legionaries themselves, but the mortal followers that they recruit. They recruit a lot of baseline humans, almost like proto-cultists, but they're there to be like secret agents. So you have like a few in like certain garrisons to like lower shields or whatever, So, but I think those like interesting stories come a lot more from those ancillary characters than the actual legion themselves.
It's the unpredictability of them as well. Like because of who they are, they're very mercurial by nature. And so when you see an Alpha Legion person in there, like who gets dropped in with what's his name?
Yeah.
All Pearson and Pearson
John
and
Grammaticus.
John Grammaticus. Like, you don't know what his motives are, because they could be anything. Ultimately, only they know kind of what his motivations are. And whenever you throw an Alpha Legionnaire in there, it always, anything can kind of happen, and you don't really know what's going to happen until the story plays out.
That kind of when we're going down to those scenes where they're below the palace, there's obviously a very iconic one there that involves just some classic Alpha Legion, just silly goofiness that actually is a very, very entertaining part of the story as well. It's that classic meme of like, shoot the fake one. It's like, how am I going to know which one's the fake one? So yeah, always very very good. Very good fun. Very very on the nose. But unfortunately, because of their nature, there's not. Rightly so, there's not a lot of like very super in-depth lore compared to the other legions, and I don't think I'd want there to be too much, because that's the whole fun of it, right? That's the mystery behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it doesn't give us a lot to go on, though, does it? So what's your kind of feelings then with regards to?
I think so.
Down here, and not, but I think not because I don't disagree with that, and it's not because of the. I think they represent a lot of potential, but there's not enough known about them other than, you know.
I'd love to peek. I'd love to peek behind the curtain, but I know it'd instantly ruin it for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great books again. Praetorian of Dawn, when they attack Pluto, and this epic battle between Dawn and Alpharius is amazing. But even then, it kind of leaves you guessing. Like, was it Alpharius? You don't know. You kind of. It's almost like they've got a get out of jail free card to do anything from a narrative perspective with them. You know, worst case. Oh shit, that didn't. I don't really like how that story went. Oh, don't worry, it wasn't actually Alpharius. Like, or something, which I guess is a little bit more kind of blur compared to, you know, other legions.
They're cool. But they're so cool. Don't get me wrong, they're really cool, but they're not as not well written, but they're not as heavily developed as the other legions.
Yeah, I would do that. I would say the same. So we have reached the last bit. So the last rule set. It's another chunky one, so bear with me for the Alpha Legion. Mutable tactics. For each formation in an army made up entirely of Alpha Legion detachments, ignoring allied contingents, the controlling player may set up to 3 Alpha Legion detachments in the army to be affected by mutable tactics. For each allied contingent in an army made up entirely of Alpha Legion detachments, the controlling player may select up to 1 Alpha Legion detachment to be affected by mutable tactics. The tactics with the flyer special rule cannot be chosen. So a detachment chosen to be affected by mutable tactics gains a special rule dependent on the detachment type. If the selected detachment is made up of infantry, cavalry, walkers, or vehicles, all models within it gain either the infiltrate, outflank, or forward deployment special rule. This is chosen by the controlling player, and different detachments can choose different rules. If the selected detachment is of another type, it gains the forward deployment rule. I think that this. So there is. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong, right? It's an awesome rule. There's definitely ways that you can mitigate it. Space Wolves, for instance, help stop against infiltrating, for instance. But it's the versatility that you get from this particular rule set. Like if you know somebody's taking a ton of Space Wolves, which are going to sniff out your infiltratey boys, well, you just use forward deployment and get a bonus move anyway and get halfway up the board that way. Or you outflank and come in on a later turn. The biggest benefit of this rule is there's 2. And one was demonstrated at Warhammer World, is that you can basically set up an entire force directly in the face of your opponent and charge them on turn 1, which is a frustrating use for this, I think. And I think it's not a nice way to play. It's not fun. But there is things that you can do to counter that. Vehicle screening, you know, like I said, point defense for charges, all of that kind of stuff will help. But I think if you're doing that, the other thing you can do is you immediately contest objectives, immediately capture objectives in that kind of middle neutral territory areas and be cranking those scores on from turn 1. You're also forcing people that you're going to have to come and get them off of you because you've already got it. So you're forcing them to attack you on those objectives and contest those objectives. And yeah, I mean, even, you know, three detachments per formation. You take 3 formations of these, that's 9 detachments which could be set up within 3 inches. Within, I think, is it 4 inches? It's really close of in an infiltration. I think infiltration is very strong at the moment. There needs to be rules, which is like I feel like some of the changes that need to be made to legions is maybe you can't charge if you've infiltrated turn 1, or something like that, which stops that
Just
from
something to limit it a
happening
little
and it
bit.
from being abused quite to that. Just needs throttling back somewhere a little bit. But I mean, I think this is absolutely an S tier ability, purely from the level of flexibility that you get from it. And you're not pigeonholed into anything. And each of those detachments can take completely different set of rules if they want to. You can outflank one, forward deploy another, infiltrate another. It's very, very flexible. So although there are some counters out there, I think you are never without options. I do think that although it's a once per game ability, if I was going to have a once per game ability, it would be to start in your face and immediately start scoring objectives. So I feel like it's a game-winning special rule, and as such, I think it belongs well and truly at the top of the thing.
Yeah, I think that it's just so impactful, right? And then you're not forced to do the action either. So if you're in a situation where you don't want to deploy in their face, you're not losing anything because you've got so many other options up your sleeve.
Absolutely.
S quite easily, I'd say.
Boy, Johnny, it has been a long one today.
Damn right.
The longest one we've done in a while. However, if you're a patron, it doesn't end here. We do have our Noosphere section following this on. So if you are a patron of Maximal Fire, you will get bonus content as well. If you want to even more, we'll be probably pushing 4 hours. I would have thought by the time
we're going to be deranged and babbling by the end of that. So if you want to catch our descent into madness, join us in the Noosphere.
Absolutely. Then definitely stay tuned. But if not, please remember to like and subscribe and do all of that. Like I say, when we hit 2,500, we'll do the same thing again for loyalists, assuming it was good.
Like the format, like, oh, this was lit,
and it was interesting, and it's like it was fucking too long. Sorry, this shit takes a while to do. Hopefully, you just tuned into us while hobbying and just like we've become nice background ASMR,
shouting into the mic to really freak him out.
Yeah, good evening and welcome to Alex and Johnny Hobby 3 hours. On today, we're going to be talking about the fishing forecast
for some slow jazz.
But yes. Anyway, so yeah, do please like and subscribe. We'll catch you again next time, and hopefully, plenty of you will be sticking around for this next section. So I'll just say at this particular point, do remember to always, as always, and for always, go big, go loud,
go Maximal.